Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new season of the X Button with Season 4, Episode 1. I am one of your hosts, Alejandro. With me is the Sugar Daddy.
Hey everybody, my name is Paul, and I'm too excited to even really have a title for today.
Yeah.
It's we're back.
Yes, we're officially back after a month. Paul, it's been a month since last we recorded. That's wild. I think this has been the longest we've been away. It feels like
It was
because
well needed, I tell you.
oh yes, especially because you're gonna be a father soon. as we ended season 3, at the very end, that you dropped that bomb that I knew about it, but we planned on just dropping that bomb, and a few people caught on to that right at the end. One gave
Yep.
you a very hilarious out of context congratulations in our clan, which was one of the freaking funniest things that happened unprompted, because I was like, I
Yep.
didn't even tell him, so that's what made it even funnier. So how are you feeling that, knowing that
I
you're 5 months
well,
away?
it feels weird. We just went to get the big anatomy scan for the baby, and that's where the technically the gender is revealed, but we had it put into an envelope and uh, shipped off with a family friend so that we can have not like an actual party for any sort of reveal, but just like a video where we can look at it and have like a big moment where it's not just Elizabeth's on a table and I'm just
Hmm.
kind of standing here. She didn't think that that was a very like big momentous feeling for our first child. So that's what we're going to do with that. But we're keeping names very close to our chest.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of people try to suggest to us what our child should be, but we are going to hold to a really solid idea that we have, and we're very excited. Maybe I'll tell you later on after
Yeah.
recording what we're
Yeah, definitely.
thinking.
Yeah, definitely keep it in the down low. I would love to know, do you all know yet the gender?
Nope.
How far away? How far away are
Um,
we from then?
the 20th
Of this month?
of this month, which is the
Ooh,
9th currently on
yeah.
recording. So it's going to be a couple of weeks at least,
Mm,
but it's going to be worth it. In the end, we're going to know for the rest of the process anyway. So what's another week and a half?
mm,
But yeah, that's where we are right now, and we're just building things up, buying a couple baby items that we need. We have a registry, a baby
mm.
shower coming up in February we have to travel for, and when the baby shows up, things are gonna have to take a bit of a change
Oh yes,
in
already.
every part, but not
in,
just here.
in fact, it changes already because I had already been talking with you at the beginning of December because that's when I knew of the kid. You kind of just kept it
Mhm.
in the download till you announced it on Facebook. Because of your impending fatherhood and getting everything ready this next couple months, officially Paul becomes like a sort of part timer for the X button. What that means is
Yep.
that he is officially always gonna be in the show at least 2 episodes within a month, and whether he's in the other 2 episodes depends on his schedule and availability. So he may be in all of them this month. Who knows? He may just be in the two, and then he's out until the next one. But that's to kind of help with the load of his job that he ends up working really late. Like you got out of work at 6 today in your time,
Yep.
at my 5. So it's to try to help you living up the burden. And I'm still always going to be hosting, so the show continues unabated. And kind of like how we had been already setting it up inadvertently last season, where we had our buddy Sebastian kind of come in and fill up, and me bringing in other guests like Travis from IGN or Hoglaw from Richard Hogue from Hoglaw, and a bunch of the guys from Season Gaming. Like during those times that Paul can't be there, that's when we're gonna bring in also the other guests. But yeah, Paul still continues here. He's just gonna help him try to ease into fatherhood because I know what that does to a person. So, and then when he becomes,
Yeah.
and then when the baby's born, that's gonna be or more interesting how we're gonna deal with that. So, but
Yeah. Not sure what's gonna go down with that yet. There's a
yes,
lot of
May, right?
changes. Not yeah, May.
Yeah.
Not only the baby, but new house and actual
Oh,
unpacking potentially. So
mm,
big mix of all of the good stuff. We're
yeah.
just Russian rouletting life right now. New house,
Yes.
baby, all of the things. But we're super excited about all of that, and hopefully on the back end of it, it's going to lead to a much smoother process in life.
Oh yes. So, but until that happens, those are kind of like the new parameters, and we'll continue the show, which starting our officially Paul, our 4th year in a row doing this. That's kind of wild.
For
Real, yeah,
4 years.
yes. Technically 5 if you include the mulligan.
Yeah.
That's what's so crazy. But yeah, just the fact that we were able to like do this show for right now. I'm looking at the number 132 like consistent episodes. Obviously, me being in all of them, you like being in at least 115 of those, due to either vacations or natural disasters or moving, like it happened last year. It's wild that we've been able to make it this way, and seeing how much the show and the audio side grew last year, which was so highly appreciated. That gives me fuel for to try to continue doing this, because obviously early on when you don't see traffic, you're like, are we doing the right thing? Should we continue? But all the opportunities and like, all the people that I met thanks to doing this, so can't wait to see like what this year has in store for us, especially after the madness that was 2023 and its onslaught of releases, which is what we're doing in today's episode. Like as tradition dictates, this is our Game of the Year episode. So we're gonna be talking about like what were our favorite games of the year, the honorable mentions, the games that disappointed us, and things like that. But before we dive into that, it's just a reminder that this is the X Bottom Podcast, our gaming podcast that posts every Fridays from 2 p.m. onward, God willing, available in the YouTube channel Escape Gaming, as well as most audio services around the world, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the like. You can find links in the RSS feed at tinyurl.com/escapegaming. If you enjoy our show, give us a like and subscribe. And if you probably noticed, my voice is very different because I've been sick. So, Paul, before we dive into all the releases that we kind of want to crown, now that you've been removed from it, like, what was your top level thought of 2023?
Um, Top level is, as we've been saying, is fantastic for the immediate consumer side and absolutely terrible in a lot of the behind the scenes side. I don't want to short sell it. The releases were fantastic. There
Oh
were a
yeah.
lot of exciting sequels, especially as you and Sebastian had said in our group chat.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things went down, a lot of changes happened, a few
Mm-hmm.
positive ones that kind of got swept under the rug, that we're hoping are going to lead to a really positive change in certain companies. Looking at
Mm-hmm.
you, Ubisoft.
Yeah.
Maybe looking potentially kind of
Going up.
saucy over there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And the
And a
upswing.
lot of really negative things, unfortunately, that are continuing to plague us. And of course, overarching lack of respect from other industries at the same time. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Oh
let's
yes.
go, baby. Continuing as usual. How about you?
Yes, it's like I think this year will always be remembered as the monkey's paw.
Mm,
Like we have been waiting for a year like this for a long time. Since probably like 2019, I would say. Like a year where we were never starved for things to play, or there were never any asterisks. Like in 2020, the pandemic, 2021 post-pandemic, 2022, the results of the pandemic, like complete deserts or things like that and delays. It's like everything coalesced this year to give us like sequels to pretty much all the franchises that we love. It's like it's wild thinking about that we've been fans of some of these franchises at any point in our lives and we got something from them this year. So bad. We get all that, and then unfortunately it was just a parade of bad news, layoffs, the bad business practices, and turbulent times in the industry and things like that. That it's always gonna be interesting, like analyzing this year from with an asterisk, as like, yeah, the games were amazing, but did that also cost us the future? That will be interesting to see 2 or 3 years from now, based on how long these things like take to digest. But in the here and now, Paul, I definitely want to celebrate like the blessings of this year. And in fact, it's like this is the longest list I've had of games that I both beaten and played, and also that I liked that I needed to kind of like compartmentalize. So uh, let's start with honorable mentions, and I kind of want to start with you because what's funny is that you have like only one list of honorable mentions. I basically
yeah.
like compartmentalize mine just to kind of like separate it into different tiers of honorable mentions. So read them, like read all of them through, and kind of like give brief explanations for why each game enter there.
Okay.
So.
So for all of mine, pretty much, they went under the honorable mentions category of would have made top 10 any other year.
Hmm.
And honestly, as I read through, it'll make perfect sense. So
Hmm.
we have Metroid Prime Remastered. Unfortunately, it did get lost a little bit in the limbo, but as
Hmm.
far as if it was in any other space, I would have absolutely loved to continue playing it. Like you said, putting it up
Hmm.
on the big screen TV. It was a solid remaster. I would almost even not call it just a
It's,
remaster
yeah,
because
it's
they
a
really
remake. Yeah.
overhauled every part of the textures and some of the mechanics and really made it pop for this year, especially for the controllers.
Hmm.
Um, excuse me. So yeah, it was great. Good time. Diablo 4. This one was honestly, I even though I soured on it quite a bit after things
The main
kind of
campaign.
both the main campaign, I did have a brief resurgence after they fixed the grinding process,
Hmm.
but it wasn't really enough for me. I decided that I didn't like having to recreate a new character for every season. In the end,
Hmm.
it wasn't as bad as I was really frustrated about for it, but there's
Hmm.
just that loss of progress was really detrimental to me. And that's one reason why it landed here instead.
Hmm.
Lies of P. I'm actually currently trying to restart this on our
On.
PlayStation
Hmm.
on the real deal right here, and I am having a blast. I
Hmm.
love the vibes of it. The atmosphere is just untouched,
And also
and
an asterisk to remember all the people are maybe coming in into this episode or that they listen. The stipulation this year that was that top 10 would be like all the games that we beat.
oh
Also,
yes, that's
so.
also a big
Mhm.
reason why things didn't show up. But I am still I will tell you if any of this would have made it into my top 10 if I'd finished it. As of right now, I'm still pretty satisfied with where they are, even if I didn't. But at the same time, Liza P was a fantastic game, and if any other year, it absolutely would have reached, I think, top five possibly. But this year is this year. Next
Yeah.
one was Sea of Stars. Chrono Trigger, pixel art, really chill, really great music, fantastic artwork. Actually fun to play, turn-based
Hmm.
game. Really active, like Mario Superstar Saga style combat, where there's a lot of like button presses and little like on the rhythm kind of hits to do more damage or to mitigate damage. But the fact that they tell you flat out at the start, hey, don't worry too much about not getting this all the time. The game is designed to miss a decent amount of times. So it's just such a solid game, great world building, awesome everything, and it just somehow couldn't really break into the top 10 because of this year. Payday 3 was next. Exactly. This one was great for the experience that you and I had. And ever
Hmm.
since that point, they had terrible issues with their servers, lack of content, lack of ability to find matchmaking
Hmm.
because they completely redid things from the way Payday 2 was, which was a much more visual menu that you could easily find a team, and it took a lot of the great stuff away from Payday
Hmm.
2. And I think I said several months ago now, I can't wait in 10 years when this game is what it should be.
Hmm. Oh yeah, kind
Which
of
is
like the
very
second game.
unfortunate,
Hmm.
but it is exactly what the second game was, and that's kind of how Overkill operates, which is the dev for Payday 3.
Hmm.
Hogwarts Legacy, one of the, I believe, biggest selling game of 2023, you said?
22 million officially sold. Yeah.
Absolutely insane. Once again, completely separating it out as just art. It had a great opening. It had a great map of Hogwarts. I enjoyed the dueling, but the running around for fetch quests, the lack of a powerful third act, just really kind of soured me. And with a couple of exceptions, I didn't really enjoy too many of the characters either. All
Hmm.
of the good ones were from the Dark Arts storyline, which
Hmm.
is easily the best part of the entire game. But overall, it wasn't bad. It was all right. And if it wasn't this year, it probably would have made top 10.
Hmm.
Hi-Fi Rush definitely would have been top 10. It started off really high for me, and just as
Hmm.
things came out, it would have gone there.
That
It's
one
a hack
became a
and slash.
casualty. That became
Yeah,
a casualty of the
unfortunately.
list. Yeah.
Because I adored this game, every part of it. I want to someday go back to it in some ways, especially if we hear what that news was talking about, where it might
Hmm.
be migrating away from Xbox into some others.
Hmm.
But I would definitely replay it again. I'd buy it again. I love the story. I want them to make a sequel. Fantastic
Hmm.
attempt. And would you call it an indie game?
No,
We
because
had that discussion, didn't we?
yes, it's like that one was made by a first party from
Yeah.
Microsoft.
Okay.
So
But
Tango. Yeah.
at least it had the vibe of all that. So yeah, that would
Hmm.
have gone there. Street Fighter 6 next. I love this game. It was so fun. I played it a lot, and all of these releases kind of pushed it out. Also, the predatory marketplace practices were not fun. It was very expensive for a
Yeah.
lot of those outfits and stuff.
And by the way, like to interject, yes, like that's a problem with Capcom. I've been noticing, and any game that they
Yeah.
have monetization, it's always like post-launch that they sneakily become like very anti-consumer, like
I
literally.
I replayed Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition, and I forgot that they had a ton of microtransactions for like I forget the currency all of a sudden, but I used to call them
Like the
Proud
Blood
Souls,
Echoes or
the
something like
blood,
yeah,
yeah, the
like
blood echoes. So yeah, it's really bad with that. And like you can spend a little bit of money to get the super version of the characters, which gives you infinite devil trigger. It's messy. It made me feel icky watching it. But fortunately with special edition you don't have to buy any of that because you kind of get most of it already. But yeah, so Street Fighter 6, that's one reason for that, but it was the best fighting game of this year, that's for sure. Next, Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Just throwing that in there. Had a lot of fun. Got to play with my wife, which was really entertaining and bonding experience through fire. Absolutely. I love the little accessibility options for like Yoshi and Nabbit
mhm.
to let people who just aren't good at playing games really enjoy the fun parts of it, which is really how you get people into playing games in the first place.
Oh yes.
But also, they didn't quite innovate a lot for Mario. I mean,
Mhm.
it's also 2D Mario. There's not much you can do, I would say. But we've also seen that is not true for a lot of indie games. So
Mhm.
Nintendo needs to get their head out of the grass and notice what everybody else has done to innovate this genre in the last 20 plus years, maybe
Mhm.
30 to 40 now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where we are with that. Assassin's Creed Mirage,
Mhm.
fantastic game. Loved the length of it. Loved the mechanics. Loved the environment. Loved the feel of it all. They added New Game Plus before Spider-Man.
Yeah.
There was a lot of cool stuff
We'll
that they
talk
put in
about
there.
that. We're
Yeah, we're
absolutely
gonna get
talking
into
about
that.
that. Yeah.
But we had just a lot of great stuff with Assassin's Creed Mirage. Once again, would have been in this with any other year.
Mhm.
Curveball here, Fortnite.
Mhm.
2023 coming out with Chapter 5, completely new map. Even before that, doing the OG,
Mhm.
return to the original map, really solid mechanics. But then right after that, dropping a lot of new characters, dropping a complete rework of the movement mechanics. A lot of the shooting is completely redone. Adding in Lego Fortnite, which is Minecraft, adding
Mhm.
in the rocket racing, which is just a complete racing mode partnered with Rocket League, and then Fortnite Festival, which is Rock Band, coming
Mhm.
back with a vengeance. The crazy amount of detail in each of these things is honestly insane, and I could
And all
see
free.
somebody. Yeah, and all free. I could easily see somebody buying any of those individually if they were not name brand brands for at least like 30, $40 or something. They could have sold that as an expansion or something. Instead, they just gave it to us for free, which, I mean, granted, they're making a ton of money on all of those microtransactions and outfits.
Mhm.
Um, which is another issue. And if I'm going to talk about Street Fighter 6 as a negative, I got to at least mention that side of it. It's kind of ridiculous. You have to spend $15 to $20
Per
for
skin.
one outfit.
Mhm.
That is ridiculous. I do appreciate a lot of the ones that will come with like 2 to 4 different alternatives, and I'm like, okay, that is four. Especially some of them are very different from one another. I
Mhm.
respect it, and they don't seem to change the price very much for that. There's like a little bit of variation, depending on popularity of the character, but that's overall not really a starter. But yeah, just Fortnite in general, I got to give them a little bit of kudos because they
They got
finally
you.
got me
They,
after all of these years.
yeah,
Uh,
they got
yeah,
me too.
Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, the Far Cry 7 that we never knew we needed, with all of
Hmm.
the updates to that genre that we didn't expect and are very appreciative of.
Hmm.
The characters are absolutely non-existent. There's a few issues that I have with the survival mechanics and the crafting system. However, when you run out into the jungle for the first time, when you get your flying Ikrun, when you get to go up into the windy plains with the kites and the red trees and stuff, fantastic.
Hmm.
And I was genuinely shocked and pleasantly surprised. And if anybody's asking, like they're itching for Far Cry,
Hmm.
I would really bring them over here. Like, don't think too much about the fact that it's attached to Avatar. Trust me, it's way better than you think it is.
Yeah.
Uh, and then the last but not least, God of War, Ragnarok, Valhalla, coming out with it's just a roguelike mode
Free
service,
edition.
an epilogue, free edition to wrap up things with Kratos. Turns out it was a whole freaking emotional arc for our
Mhm.
boy Kratos, wrapping up like. Yeah, they said epilogue, but they did not specify how this was a really good way to bring things full circle. And I would say it is required playing if
Yeah.
they do any other DLCs or anything else for this, which sounds like they're still doing that one DLC at least, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, we don't know yet.
Yeah, we don't
That's
know.
kind of like
That's
that's
all leaks and
speculation. Yeah.
conjecture. Anyway, yeah. So absolutely, if you liked God of War, if you like God of War Ragnarok, please go back and play this. The roguelike elements of it are really not what you thought they were going to be in like a
They're
negative
Hades.
connotation.
They're
They're like
Hades.
very Hades. You get a lot of permanent buffs. You get a really good rage mode that is alternative and new to that, but it can also go back into the
New Game Plus.
the main game. Thank you. The new game plus a lot of new armors, new skins for your weapons and such. Actually, no, that's not true. It's just the armors, but yeah, you can transfer all of that stuff into the main game. So please go do yourself a favor, download that for free, go play it, and then go back and replay God of War Ragnarok with all of your new stuff. And that is all of my honorable mentions. I
Oh
feel like
yes.
I got like a good little rhythm going there by the end of it. Now, do
Mhm.
you want to go ahead and start just listing all of your stuff?
Yes. Yes. Now mine, which I've
Right.
separated. So mine, I'm gonna start with the honorable mentions, games that would have made my top 10 if I finished them. First of them, Baldur's Gate 3. The biggest game of this year, obviously, the winner of the Game of the Year award at the Game Awards and various few outlets, kind of like the critical darling of the year. I barely made a dent in this thing. So, but what I played of it, I hated this game at first, but returning to it, playing it co-op with my sister, like during the holiday, and getting a little bit more knee deep into it, made me appreciate more, like what it actually does for like a CRPG, like in console or things like that. That someday this year I'll fully dive in. Hopefully, I can get you in so we can play multiplayer because this game is a shockingly amazing multiplayer experience that works so well
Oh,
on
yes.
the D&D like idea, and kind of like how amazing the dice rolls are. Like I did two separate playthroughs where I completely screwed up a dice roll while I did another. I was like, this is so cool that this game can really go sideways and makes it so intriguing that they accounted into everything. So yeah, that's why it's an honorable mention. Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. Again, Cyberpunk, amazing comeback story, and Phantom Liberty, for all intents and purposes, is like kind of like the coup de grace of that game, as like the final like definitive endpoint for like this first game, and CDPR kind of like finishing their redemption arc with like their disastrous launch with probably their best piece of content of the game. Didn't finish it, but I can appreciate both the work they have done like in quality to bring this thing up to snuff and the quality of the new content. So Lies of P, with the one of the two Souls likes of this year that I played, Lies of P's Bloodborne aesthetic and how it manages to ape that plus Sekiro, it's actually pretty brilliant, and how close it gets to the feel of a From Software game in a way that many Souls likes don't, and that's one that I kind of just got distracted by other stuff, but I recognize the quality of that one. And I heard it's not too long either, so I'm definitely gonna go back. And Lords of the Fallen, that's one that I bought in the hope that one day I'll get to play co-op with you, because I want to play a Souls-like that's in co-op. And this one, probably the most notable thing is probably the prettiest Souls-like I've ever seen. Kind of like in that more medieval aesthetic, kind of like its idea that it's handling two worlds at the same time. It's definitely has the more Dark Souls aesthetic, but controls very different from a Dark Souls game, kind of like in feel, in combat, and definitely want to play a little bit more of that. I heard that they have patched things because rank and file enemies were super hard, but the boss fights weren't, and I think they kind of tweaked that again. So I can't wait to hear more of that. And then Sea of Stars, I appreciate the excellence of this turn-based RPG, and again, I would have loved to have finished it to kind of like insert it into like the top 10. Really love it. It's kind of like what you mentioned, the Mario Superstar Saga quality being like a turn-based but with like active quality to it. That's better than, even though I appreciate turn-based RPGs now. This was the year I finally rediscovered my love for that kind of game. It's like there's just something about the semi turn-based but you're still active, and that's Sea of Stars. So, and I heard it's not too long, so I hope I can get back to it. Now, here at games I did finish, and it's gonna start with the would have made my top 10 any other year. That the first one of those is Dead Space, the Dead Space remake. Really excellent start to the year, and kind of like how can I say this? It's like a real testament to EA Motive's capabilities as a studio, because EA Motive was they were the ones that made the Battlefront 2 campaign, and they were the ones that made the Star Wars Squadron video game. For all intents and purposes, they were kind of mid. They had promise and potential, but they were not that great. But them taking the work from Visceral Studios, RIP, and not only reimagining the original Dead Space, but managing to modernize it in a way that there is no reason for you to go back to the 360 version of that game anymore. Like, this is like the definitive way to play this. Like, it takes all the highlights of the original places that you remember, changes other stuff that were like less stellar, and adds like extra good stuff on top of that. I feel like Dead Space remake was like really excellent, and it got lost in the shuffle because of the rest of the year, but it would have made a top 10 in any other year. Dead Cells Return to Castlevania. This is probably the one indie game this year that I actually played and finished, and probably the most impressive thing about Dead Cells Return to Castlevania is just how perfectly they do Castlevania once you unlock it, because you have to beat the game first before you unlock it in like a new run. And then like everything from like the music cues, the enemy placements, the enemy animations, things like that. The love that they have for Castlevania is such that if you have been a Castlevania fan but you're not even a Dead Souls fan, I tell you, tough it up, try it, because it's like it was excellent, and a reminder that we need a new Castlevania. And this was a good kind of like in between to us eventually getting that. Apparently the rumors are that they're working on it. Hopefully we get it soon. Diablo 4 is also like one that would have made my top 10 any other year. Diablo 4 was kind of like the game that exposed Destiny to me, kind of like how much we've been scammed when it comes to the loot game, and how like rewarding the loop of that game is. That as we were playing the campaign, at least early on, kind of like in the post-endgame stuff, it was fun having this as an alternative, considering like where Destiny was this year. And obviously, I fell off of it. I didn't do Season 1 because I heard bad stuff. I came back to it with Season 2, and I still have it installed there. Kind of like I said, whenever I need to listen to podcasts, when all my podcasts come back at the beginning of the year, and need something to kind of like kill time as I listen to them, this is going to be that game. So, Hogwarts Legacy. This is one where I would say that for a licensed game, this is the most impressed I've been for a licensed game not made by Insomniac. Like one that's like multi-platform, and one that is been made by a studio that their previous pedigree wouldn't make you think they were capable of making this kind of game. As the first attempt at doing this game, or at least this kind of game, and the last things that they did were like a cards game or even Disney Infinity, which were pretty good for like what they were. I was very impressed with what they were able to pull off, even though it wasn't perfect. Me, that I have cursory knowledge of Harry Potter, just watching the movies, not reading the books, I really enjoyed seeing the recreation of Hogwarts. Like, it's probably the game with like the best single environment when it, like that. If they really had to like nail in one thing, I feel like they perfectly recreated Hogwarts. Everything else around that you kind of mentioned is like the story's kind of mediocre. Characters are forgettable other than the dark arts like quest, and things like being able to do the Avada Kedavra like freely willy with like any consequence. It's fun in a lore breaking kind of way, but if you really care about the lore, it's kind of weird that for a game that recreated the world so perfectly, that kind of slid by. So, but besides that, it's like they have a great foundation for the sequel, and I would hope that the next game they would work on the fetchiness. They would work on maybe fleshing out more like a main story that's not about the goblins. Like they got kind of like its goblin main story was kind of like it was just but I was definitely very impressed with what they were able to pull off, and with the 22 million it has sold, a lot of people really resonated with this game. Boycotts don't work, people. They don't. 22 million in the bank is wild. Then
Boycotts can work, just to clarify. Just it was a very different kind of situation on that.
Yeah, in this case, a boycott based on social movements and how that went didn't quite work this time. Don't demonize people. Otherwise, you're gonna like inspire them to probably buy 3 copies out of spite. It would
be a very powerful motivator, unfortunately.
Oh yes, but one of my favorite things is one of the host from the Season Gaming Bitcast, he put on Twitter, he's like, new rule, if someone tries to spoil Hogwarts Legacy for me because I'm saying I'm enjoying it, I'm gonna take your name and I'm gonna donate $10 to a very conservative politician in your name. He was saying that, and he ended up doing it.
Good.
It was so funny how that was happening. Yeah.
No accounting for taste, but yeah, what else you got?
Yeah, that was so funny. Like everything surrounding Hogwarts Legacy was so weird. But probably my favorite, not least favorite, remember I mentioned it in our last episode, kind of like how you and our buddy Sebastian like really like whipped this game in the episode that we dedicated to it. So
yep.
Then my other honorable mention that would have made it my top 10 any other year was Remnant 2, a game that I really enjoyed. It's kind of like a perfect example of a game that's more like mid-budget, like kind of like in the AA space that looks like it's AAA. Really solid shooting, really solid mechanics. I really love the environmental diversity of this game, how it like improved on its third-person shooter, but sort of a Souls-like style of game, and some fun times playing co-op with you. This one remains here in my in the honorable mentions, another top 10, because fuck the final boss. Like really, like that final boss was.
I didn't even try.
Yeah, that final boss was the brutal. And again, it's like I had this thing where if your final taste leaves me sour, it's like it can really sour my opinion on the package. So that happened to me with Remnant 2, but I can still respect a lot of the things that I loved about it, and that's why it would have made top 10 any other year. So, and then I'm putting an asterisk to this because I'm coming back to it. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 would have also made my top 10 any other year, and obviously Insomniac's sequel, the big PlayStation exclusive of this year. I would say like just as fun in some ways as the first 2 Spider-Man games. Definitely some of the best moments that happened in the game this year, and really great spectacle. I'll also say that there are particular things about this game that also puts it in another category that we're gonna talk much later, and it's both a game that deserves to be here and deserves to be in that other spot. So I'll save it for that. And then another category I had in honorable mentions is the best 7 out of 10 games. So it's like games that are really good. I enjoyed 7s, and those were Assassin's Creed Mirage. I really like this as a return to form for the Assassin's Creed series, as they keep rebuilding into something that retains the spirit of Assassin's Creed instead of like the RPG bonanzas that we got, which I did enjoy at a certain point, but it was like me just trying to cope with the fact that that's what the series had become, and Mirage was a reminder it can be something else. Then Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, a really good Far Cry, kind of you mentioned it, this would basically be Far Cry 7. Like, is your skin as Pandora? Its survival elements are a real bummer because it's like that stifles progression in like really tough ways if you're not engaging in its world. But on the contrary of being able to engage with the world of Pandora is amazing for a video game. And that was one of my favorite environments to get lost in. And really beautiful game. Snowdrop engine for Ubisoft is in fighting shape for like being like one of the best looking things that can be available in the market. This one is I'm in the higher end of this one. I expect, because other people have been like definitely slanting it. I feel like people are being a little too harsh on it, and I did see this one through Forspoken. Like, this was the first game I played this year. I feel like I had the advantage of the order of operations of me playing this before I played Dead Space, unlike you, Paul, that you jumped into Dead Space immediately and completely ruining yourself ever being able to go back to that one.
I
But
still stand by my decision though because I enjoyed a way better game.
yeah, and I got to enjoy both. So, uh, Forspoken is definitely a game that it's very backloaded with its best stuff. Like, once you get all the powers and you see kind of like where the story actually goes, it's like a more epic game than it even seems, considering like how irreverent the main character is. The dialogue was kind of like weird out of context, but in context, some of like the cringiness kind of worked. And
It did, yeah.
and then I really love moving in this world. Like, the parkour was great, and it reminded me of Infamous and Prototype in many places. So
Hmm.
definitely, it was a fun first kind of like, the bread that you get when you go to a steak. The bread with like the butter that you can that you
Oh
can
yeah,
get
yeah.
before you get your entrees. So that's kind of how I saw it first spoken. It's doesn't deserve to be in the conversation with like the worst crap that came out in 2023, because as great as 2023 was, there was some really bad games that came out this year, and some
True.
people try to put this in that same category. I'm like, no, this is what better than that. But it's kind of like in that limbo. So, and then the other the best 710 to me is Immortals of Avium. I really enjoyed this magic shooter because in a year that's been really bad for shooters, you'll hear about that later. It's like, at least this one gave me a story-based, meaty first-person shooter with like an interesting twist to it. Not the best looking game. There was some really weird visual stuff with this game. There was like the Uncanny Valley was weird. There was like a blurriness because it tried to use all the Unreal Engine 5 assets and systems that were not capable of handling all of that. And the story was utterly forgettable. But I really enjoy it. So, and then the honorable mentions that are caught in limbo. This wouldn't have made top tens, but I kind of like in that in between space.
Yeah.
It's real quick, Metroid Prime Remastered. Really enjoyed that one, but I feel like I needed to give more note to other stuff. Mortal Kombat 1. Really enjoyed. Really enjoyed its story mode. Don't like anything else about the package. Street Fighter 6. I enjoyed the mechanics of this game, but the story mode didn't do it for me, and I quickly blew through the arcade individual characters, kind of like as the only thing that I really care for about that package. And Payday 3, just the experience I had with you and us meeting Travis and his fiance D, and getting to like play and me screwing up like in some of our heists. Those were good times, and obviously I didn't experience when that game completely collapsed afterwards. So, but really enjoyed it. And now, Paul, we move to the other category that I mentioned, and that was the disappointments. And we have some crossover, but read the ones, because two of the games that are 710s were in your disappointments. Read those two first.
Yeah, which let me see. That was for Spoken, I believe. Is that right?
I'm highlighting them.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, yeah. So for Spoken was my biggest disappointments because I remember when this got revealed as Project Athea, and it
2020.
looked fantastic. It was so cool to look at. The movement was insane. It was very clearly like, what if Final Fantasy 15's traversal didn't suck? And it was like you had the same looking world, you had really detailed awesome lighting on it, crazy magic using different elements and stuff. It was like, this is the new like last airbender game that we've always looked for. And so my expectations and hope for it were super high, and then I forgot what I was dealing with was Square Enix not on their best game. So literally in this case there, I will say I was pleasantly surprised a little bit on the
Beginning.
emotion of, yeah, the beginning of like the emotion behind the character and what her whole deal is deep down underneath, like the bravado that got shown and talked to death already. And like you said, some of the comedic moments in context were actually hilarious, especially when everybody's talking super flowery and stuff, and I think rhyming or something. And she's like, "All right, if you're gonna keep rhyming, you might as well just freaking kill me now." I was like, "Okay, that was pretty funny." And then it just felt like there was nothing between those little moments of, okay, yes, this is technically a really cool elemental like shooter and traversal and stuff because there's actually a lot of weird limitations to it. You only get like a couple of them in a decent enough stretch of time that I didn't feel like I was getting enough forward progression. A lot of the powers themselves were kind of just copy and paste. I didn't feel like there's enough difference in those elemental parts of it. Some of them just didn't feel powerful. The world, the characters, just nothing. And yeah, it just really fell apart to me after the first, I would say, 10 hours. And then I stopped. I did not look back, and I went to play way better games. And I do not regret my decisions at all. The
Oh
next one
yeah.
that I did was Immortals of Avium. This was kind of just it I was really hoping for something a little more with the whole like it's Call of Duty but with magic, and I was like, that's
Hmm.
freaking awesome. And it didn't feel like it really lined up with that in the end. Like the world building was great. The concept behind it is really cool. What are you gonna
It
say?
does later in the game. It's just that you stop because you want to play Armor Core. We'll talk about that later.
And
Yeah.
once again, I do not regret my decision. So
Hmm.
it's just it was kind of like after a while I didn't enjoy it. Like you said, with the weird like muddy visuals as well, I just wasn't vibing with that at all. But maybe once again, it could be something else. And I also don't disparage anybody who had it higher on their own lists, especially yours in the honorable mentions, because it should have and it would have been in there if it didn't just sour so poorly. And
Hmm.
then I also play a very different kind of game right after.
Oh yes,
The
I
last
stuck
one
with it. Yeah.
was, yeah.
No,
Did you want me to talk about the last highlight? No.
no,
Okay.
because we have it together. Let me
Got it.
read the ones that you don't have in the list because then we have a few that overlap. Atomic Heart was there in my disappointment list. This one hurt because it looked like Bioshock. We haven't had a Bioshock style
Oh,
game
it
in like
was.
forever, and the feel of that game was wrong. The tone was wrong. That it just I just stopped. It was like this was one of the few games that this year that I didn't beat that I let go of. Like I did beat so many this year, but this was one where I was like kind of looking forward to it because it looked interesting, but it was like it definitely like didn't stuck with me. And I did recently buy an Xbox Series X because I used to have a Series S. I still have it. I bought an X over the holiday, and I reinstalled it to kind of see if that helped. Kind of like because I was playing that on Series S because it was on Game Pass, and there was just something that I wasn't quite feeling, and it definitely looks better. But there's just something weird and off about this game that I was like, yep, this one I'm letting go off. And another disappointment that I had on my list was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. This one in particular was like the big disappointment is just seeing how lazy they have become. Like Modern Warfare 3 is like the epitome of laziness. Like
Yeah.
campaign that's like many of their missions are lifted straight out of Warzone. All the slate of maps was like, yeah, let's just redo the maps from the game from 2009, and the ones that we're gonna add in season one are not that good. Like newer maps are just not that good. And then the zombie mode, oh yeah, it's gonna be open world zombie mode, something new about it. No, it's the DMC mode with zombies like sprinkled on top of it. It's just a really
Yikes.
lazy package, and I really hope this year's Gulf War Treyarch-led Call of Duty game is much better. So, and now bringing back my asterisk in the disappointment category, I also put Marvel Spider-Man 2. Kind of like I mentioned, it was like at
Starting
its
things
core,
off a little saucy there, buddy. What's going on
yeah,
here?
yeah. Spider-Man 2 definitely as fun as as Insomniac Spider-Man games can be, but I had such a really conflicting experience with this game because like its story, now that I've been removed from it, is definitely my least favorite story of the three games because it became so self-important, trying to say much without saying anything, kind of like loving the smell of its own parts. And the only good stuff about the story happens in its third act. And then by the time its third act starts, which is when Venom comes in, it puts you into the whole, why was this game not this? Like, why did it have to take until when you get the black suit and onwards, and you have to spend so much time with Craven to learn nothing about him, to the point that then it's like, gosh, I wish the excitement I felt in the last third was the entire game. And so it makes the idea of trying to revisit that game kind of like more of a chore. And the technical experience that I have with that game, obviously Russian roulette, our buddy Sebastian swears up and down that that didn't happen to him. I have proof of how buggy an experience I had Marvel Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 was the buggiest experience I had this year. The buggiest. That's insane for me. That
Definitely not for me, but
no,
what you
because for you it was Hogwarts, but for me it was like I'm usually the one that gets lucky. I don't suffer glitches. This was my glitches game.
I don't know,
Right.
maybe your PS5's just broken.
Yeah, probably not because yours like every game breaks, and I can play like 100 games before that doesn't
honestly,
happen.
it hasn't happened to me in a
Yeah.
while, so I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Maybe I shook it.
And the
Maybe
thing is that
it was the SSD having issues.
Yeah, hey, I haven't had any buggier experience since then. Like even Baldur's Gate 3 has been pretty like stable for me, and that's a buggy game. But that was kind of like unacceptable for me, especially it was like I expect Sebastian always kind of like I might make fun of it. He all talks about like the premium experience. The premium thing is like that's technically what's the kind of game Sony makes, and Spider-Man 2 wasn't that for me. I was like, holy crap! I was like, for a game that kind of looks premium, this is subpar experience. And on top of that, the lack of New Game Plus, we're seeing other games get their New Game Plus already, and that one kept being delayed. That game that came out afterwards, that it's in my top 10, that get its New Game Plus, that even completely changed the story and the context of the story. They got it out, and then they promised us that the New Game Plus was gonna come soon for this one because it was at launch in Miles Morales. Obviously, in 2018 they patched it later. But considering kind of like the coolest stuff happened late game, and I kind of wanted to go through an entire game again, or worry about like the upgrade paths and just kind of like enjoy it. Not getting New Game Plus when we could have was like I let go of the game, and then kind of like it stopped being in my mind. I was like, crap. It was like I wish I really liked this more. Why is this disappointing? Because even though I reviewed this game and gave it like a 9 out of 10, you see many places where this game could have been better. It's like the most disappointing kind of game. They're really great, like a game that's like objectively great that you can see is like excellence was completely out of its grasp. And on top of that, the things with the leaks that happened while we were gone, and learning that this game cost like 390 million in budget to make. And I look at even though the game looks expensive, I'm like, this doesn't look like a 390 million budget. It's not polished like one. What does this mean for this kind of game? This is like an interesting flashpoint that when you put all my tiny annoyances all together, it's very hard for me not to accept that as much fun as I did have with this game, to the point that I gave it a 9 even begrudgingly, because I gave the other games a 9. In hindsight, I would have given something like an 8. Like looking back now, and I wish it had been better. It had everything in it to be better. So, and I know for you, Paul, it's not here in this list, but you also feel the same. In specific, like you did agree with me that there are elements with this game that makes it maybe not disappointing like these other games in our list, but kind of like that higher end. So, with you, hashtag GadgetGate.
Yep. And I stand by everything that I've said negative about Spider-Man 2 for sure. It's funny because I look back on the moment when Gene Park and some others were like, this makes all of the previous Spider-Man games obsolete. And I went, really?
Yeah, and it took until he
have some things to say about that.
and it took like he was basing it on the movement because he loved like swinging around and flying around. He was, and in that like from a play perspective, swinging and flying in the seat, especially with the wingsuits, definitely like the most fun out of the three. The problem is content light. You run out of things to do with this game so quickly. No mission replays, no the challenge replays that you could do not as enticing.
There's
the
a
bases,
lot less side content, I feel.
Yeah.
Honestly,
definitely less bloated in a way, but it's also ironically it was like it's both a strength and a weakness, because it was like, oh yeah, the game just kind of like comes and goes. You don't have to like spend hundreds of hours in it. But again, the disappointment part, you actually do enjoy how much this game can play, like it can feel to play. That you wish there was more reasons to go back to it, and that was New Game Plus, and we didn't get it, so that adds to the disappointment. So yeah, those were the other games that were not in your list. But then like the other disappointing games that were in the list, like Atlas Fallen, that one ironically was kind of like next to Immortals of Avium, kind of like those games that we were playing in between as we were waiting for stuff to release. I enjoyed Immortals more because at the very least it was interesting. Atlas Fallen is the very definition of a game. It's not bad. It's not good. It just is. It's just so utterly forgettable. That much so that I shut off all music and audio, put a podcast on top of it, and that's how I finished it. It's like, it left literally no impression to me, and I think that's the same thing with you. Destiny 2 Lightfall. A heartbreaker, I would say. Like, this has been a heartbreaking year for Destiny because it was like we're coming from the highs of the Witch Queen. We're so excited of like entering the final phase of this story and them fumbling the ball so hard almost year round. Where even the current season ended today, and I heard that the ending was bad. I was like, Jesus Christ, they can't catch a break, can't they? It's like, even when there's good stuff that happened this year, like the dungeon that came out in December, the one that was like in the mountain, and kind of like it's like the visual grandeur, the music, it being kind of like a Dark Souls thing, and not being and still like monkey paw scenario for Destiny. For every good thing, there was like 3 or 4 things that they did bad this year. This was the worst year in Destiny history, and when you couple like the layoffs that happened that kind of like put the future of that studio in doubt, it's very hard not to like look at both Destiny 2 Lightfall's fumbling at a launch and everything that's happened since with apathy. Our clan is no longer just a Destiny clan. We've moved on into other stuff, and that's unthinkable to think of after Witch Queen.
It's really heartbreaking, and especially not only the fact that some of them are listening in on this, but I miss all of you guys. I read all of your Pokemon chats and all of the other things that y'all play, even though that's not my cup of tea right now. But it's disappointing. And especially for something that brought so many different people together of very different walks of life. To the point that even though I spent a lot of real world money on it, I felt okay with deleting it off my system for a while. I have since re-downloaded it because I got a way better hard drive, by the way, but that's another subject entirely. But yeah, the story itself was kind of non-existent. The seasonal stuff was too frustrating to go back to, and even now I played the first, I think, week of that latest season and haven't touched it since, and I don't feel like I'm missing anything.
Yeah, and especially because this is the longest season we'll have because of the delay. So I feel no pressure to play that. I really want to see how they handle the fact that they delayed the final shape. That they're going to do this Into the Light thing that apparently is like, it's supposed to appeal to newcomers and like old timers. I'm like, we'll see, but it's definitely like, I still have it installed, but yeah, this is the least I played Destiny 2 in years. And it sucks because we're coming from the highest of highs. But the biggest disappointment of this year, bar none, considering this was our number 1 most anticipated game of this fall, according to the episode that we recorded, is Starfield. Starfield was the one. Xbox put all their hopes in this one. This was the one. They literally bought Bethesda when they heard that Sony at the time was courting Bethesda to try to get this as an exclusive, kind of like they did Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo, kind of like as time exclusives. This was the game they were like, no, we're not letting this one go. We're buying the entire studio outright. They put extra money in it for like QA, so it could be like the most polished thing. This was going to be the ambitious fall game to end all fall games, considering the big ambitious game that took over the world in May. We'll definitely talk about that later. And it both scratched the itch of space exploration while also being so woefully outdated, to the point where it was like its outdatedness got like shown a light more considering what came around it. By Baldur's Gate 3, a game that revolutionized RPGs. Starfield got Witcher 3'd, kind of like what happened with Fallout 4. Everyone anticipated Fallout 4 back in 2015, but when The Witcher 3 came out and showed people what's the next leap, the game looked old, and Starfield felt that way. And on top of that, sorry, my voice. But on top of that, Starfield not only felt outdated, it missed on even delivering what made Skyrim and Fallout special by compartmentalizing its progression and exploration into fast travel the game. It was just after a while it was just, oh man, it's like I put 100 hours into this because I wanted it to be good. But when you want something to be good, that's when you know. That's when you totally know that it's like, this is not it. This is absolutely not it. Not for what they needed. And after everything that came out in the fall, Starfield feels even more outdated now.
I know you can go through a lot of subjective decisions and kind of vitriol for console people of not naming anybody, but even from an objective standpoint, a lot of the mechanics are still in use and not in a way, I'm trying to get my words together here, in a way that shows that it deserves to stick around. Like, there's certain mechanics that have stood the test of time for 20 years since like Oblivion and Skyrim. There's certainly mechanics that could have stuck around. I don't think what Starfield brought to the table is the kind of timeless that people were looking for. And that's very sad to see. Like, even just outside of the frustration and anger about it, like you said, they spent all of that effort and money to buy Bethesda to create this game that they've been working on for a very long time.
A decade.
And a decade. And it does not feel the way that I believe that they saw. And I sit back and I think about that one interview from Todd Howard where he's like, I'm just playing Starfield constantly nonstop on my Series S back home before release and everything. And I'm just like, I want what he has to be able to see something in Starfield that is so special. And truthfully, I saw it too for about 60 hours. And then all of a sudden I hated it. Like, I couldn't play it any longer. I think I deleted it off my system even. And I wish that I had what he had, that he was okay with just playing this game, but I feel like I need more. Like, in a solid relationship, I need more than just this casual experience, y'all. I want a relationship. And Starfield didn't give me what I was looking for.
Anyone that says that Starfield deserves to be even remotely considered among the very best of the year can go, like, take a hike. Like, literally. It's like way better games came out in the year.
Rethink things, please.
Oh yeah. And then I forgot to even mention it. Redfall, the other Bethesda game, which was a disaster, was like not a great look for Bethesda that year. So, all right, Paul, and that's the most disappointing games of 2023. Pretty sad about those, especially with Starfield. Like, just thinking how excited we were about that one. And
it hurts my soul.
Yeah, and obviously we're not recording later where you completely change your clothes and my voice now sounds different. But it's time for the big ones. Basically our top 11 games of 2023. So kind of like what we did for longtime listeners. If you all remember the episode we did for the definitive ranking of the Assassin's Creed games, where Paul and I both had individual lists, and then we kind of like merged it into one at the end of that episode, kind of like on the whim. This time, we kind of took that same mentality and like I had my top 10, Paul sent me his top 10, and then I made the math and compiled it all together in like one master list, and it landed at a top 11 with 3 sections or basically 3 slots with overlap. Spot number 3, spot number 10, and spot number 11. So how we're going to do this is where we're going to read from 11 to 1. So for the worst to best, even though obviously these are the best games of the year. And when we hit that overlap, Paul and I were going to have like a live discussion of if we were to separate this to make this a top 14 games of the year based on like our lists, which game would go above and beneath. So let us start, Paul, with, I feel this year of all years deserves like
a really unconventional like top list. That's not just top 10, because there were so many games based on the games that I had in my list, and the few that you had is like there were some that didn't show up in mine that they showed up in yours, but were honorable mentions. So and I kind of took that. I put it where you like if you mentioned something that was honorable mention, that was like a 0.5 to try to like adjust the math. So, but let us start. Spot 11, Spot 11, Paul. The tie was between Hi-Fi Rush and Baldur's Gate 3. So obviously Hi-Fi Rush. Because I had Hi-Fi Rush in my list and you had Baldur's Gate 3 in your list.
Yep.
Obviously, I mentioned it in honorable mentions. I put it in honorable mentions because I barely made a dent in this game, and I made sure that the top 10 that I had this year was of games that I fully finished. Kind of like I did also kind of to you, so that you made sure that another Midnight Sun situation didn't happen again. So, let me start with like Hi-Fi Rush. I think like why I put it there is like it was such a pleasant surprise at the beginning of 2023. It was like we got the first Xbox Developer Direct, which funny enough, next week we're getting the second one they're ever gonna do, where they're gonna be previewing Indiana Jones, Hellblade 2, a strategy game, and other things. They did that first Developer Direct. It's kind of like, okay, we have all these studios and we want to like have a showcase where we can talk more, because just the June showcases with all the studios that we own and all the games that we're having the pipeline is not enough. And Hi-Fi Rush was kind of like the surprise of that Developer Direct from last year, where they announced beforehand the games that were gonna be there, but they were also like, yeah, but we have a new announcement, and there it was, this game from the Evil Within developer, Tango Gameworks, doing something completely different, so colorful, so stylish. It's a style we haven't seen officially since like Jet Set Radio, and we got to see it a little bit with Bomb Rush Cyberpunk this year, a game that we didn't buy, but kind of like it was in that vibe, and it was such a fun character action based game that's rare to see in the Xbox ecosystem. It was like it was the most anti Xbox game possible, and I thought it was short, I thought it was sweet, and it was more the kind of game that I wanted out of Xbox. So talk to me about Baldur's Gate 3.
All right, so imagine every choice you've ever made in Mass Effect, but instead of really only giving you a couple of options here and there, with a couple of opportunities for your companions to potentially die, unless you had a very binary morality system, which you did really good on, then in which case they would magically survive. Let me tell you, just all of the options that you have available to you at every possible opportunity in Baldur's Gate 3, every choice from what your character is, not just who they are, but what they are, every person you have alongside you, every crazy plot thread and motivation of every NPC that comes to a head sometimes 70 hours later, is unprecedented for my brain to wrap my head around. The level of coding and planning that the developers had to make to have this even happen. On top of it, having a surprisingly robust way of translating D&D 5e into a video game, which is not an easy feat in the slightest, and making it so varied in its environment and objective. It's like not just a hey, here's enemies here in front of you on a flat plane, go kill them, but there's so many times where your objective is not just kill everything, but to do something in that process, to move through the space and feel like your character is really having agency through that, or even to somehow completely circumvent the problem where dialogue only games get boring because you're talking your way out of the video game. Looking at Starfield as a great example, and a lot of the Bethesda games of that nature. But this being an entire part of your journey, and then not only having something like the Dark Urge, obviously, which completely revamps everything, puts it on its head, having crazy plot lines, fantastic characters, great performances, that's definitely my choice through that.
Yeah. And let me add, because I was able to play a little bit more of Baldur's Gate 3 over the break, and
Oh yeah, didn't even
yeah,
talk about that.
yeah, kind of like my breakthrough moment that I had with that game was its co-op. Like getting to play that game with my sister and me talking with her about like this is so strange being able to play a game that she would usually watch me play, a la Mass Effect, and getting to make choices like together, getting those dice rolls, seeing how well the split screen of that game works, me finally understanding why like Larian was so adamant about about them including a split screen and why they were not bringing that game on Xbox with the parity clause that Xbox had with the Series X and S, because they couldn't make that split screen work on the Series S, because you have to play like a game like D&D with someone. Like that's the beauty of doing like a Dungeons and Dragons thing, kind of like the campaigns that you build together with your buddies and like with the masters and all that. And I was talking with our friend Duncan about it. Like he hates playing Baldur's Gate 3 by himself, but when he plays with someone else, loves it. So it's like that was like kind of like my breakthrough, and I kind of got to understand the idiosyncrasies of a CRPG in controller. And also it was helped that I went to other sort of CRPG games, kind of like KOTOR, Dragon Age Origins, kind of like an Xbox, just to kind of like reacquaint myself into something a little bit more tame, but in that style, to kind of like get it. And I really got it with Baldur's Gate 3. Again, it's an honorable mention because of my self-imposed limitations that we put for ourselves this year. And did you finish it, Paul?
No.
Yeah, so this was the exception that we're gonna make for this year, as long as you put it like at the very bottom of your list. That was like the only way that we're so now, Paul, like deciding between Baldur's Gate 3 and Hi-Fi Rush, which goes above and beneath. I'll say Hi-Fi Rush goes at the bottom and Baldur's Gate 3 goes at the top. Even as someone that hasn't beaten it, I saw it and I'm like, yeah, this is like objectively great. There's a reason this is like Game of the Year winner somewhere else. But again, this is our lists. But I feel in that case, this becoming a top 14 games, Hi-Fi Rush becomes 14 and Baldur's Gate 3 becomes 13. So,
Yep. Agreed.
yeah, so now that what would become spots 12 and 11, it was the tie between the two games that launched literally the same day. Super Mario Bros. Wonder and Spider-Man 2. It's so funny how that happened. So, obviously, the big Nintendo game. Yeah, it's so wild that in our list, that's how it landed with like the math. But yeah, so yeah, I had Mario Wonder there in my list. You had Spider-Man 2. So yeah, and then Mario Wonder is like an absolutely wonderful video game. It's like it's finally Nintendo rediscovering kind of like the magic of 2D Mario for me, after they had been like stuck in generic territory with the the new Super Mario Bros. Franchise, all the way from the DS to the Wii U and the Switch re-release. This was a game that I hold near and dear to my heart because seeing the joy of watching my dad and my mom seeing some of the delightful parts of the Wonder Seats, like early on with the piranha singings, and how that this game has visual imagination that you would only see in like a game like Rayman Origins or Rayman Legends, and seeing Nintendo kind of like adopt that again while also being like a top of the line 2D platformer. Like I was like, I had an absolutely wonderful time from start to finish when I played this game back in October 20th and the 21st. And also when I reviewed it for my own site, where I gave it like a 9.5 out of 10. So definitely I had more fun with other games this year. It was more like, this is still a 2D Mario game, so you know what it is in a way, but it was just perfect execution for what I wanted out of it. And it's definitely my favorite 2D Mario since my favorite game of all time, which is Super Mario World and the Super Nintendo. It's like the most I have adored a 2D Mario game, and see my sister also adore that game. She's beaten it twice already. She like played it with her boyfriend. She played it with my brother over there in Europe. And just hearing like the joy that a lot of new people that got into 2D Mario with this one have, makes me so happy. Be like new kids that got into Mario thanks to the Mario movie that came out in 2023. The Mario game that they had as a quote-unquote companion for that year was this one. I'd rather this be the thing that like materializes like what 2D Mario can be for them instead of the new Super Mario Bros. Games. Because when I compare that, I'm like, I would rather anyone grow with any other kind of platformer than the new Super Mario Bros. Games. So Mario Wonder, I tip my hat. And obviously, this is your time to talk about Spider-Man 2. I already talked about it in my other two categories. But I think I have a few things that I kind of want to say in this list too. So
So my turn. I will say, this one's a lot more difficult for me to make a decision on because, on the one hand, I did love Mario Wonder.
Mm-hmm.
On the other, I did not finish Mario Wonder.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, Spider-Man 2 really frustrates me with a lot of its choices and a lot of its decisions on how things moved forward for that IP.
Hashtag
It's
Gadgetgate.
Yep, we're not gonna talk about that one exactly, but I was more actually thinking narrative decisions.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right. A lot of gameplay decisions were very different. New York somehow feels less. I don't know how
Robust.
to describe this one, but there is something missing about the environment, despite the fact that there's way more NPCs. Um, I don't know what it is about it,
It's
but
broader but less depth.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that would be the case. Also, the fact that they just made random edits to their own map to fit different locales
Mm.
from the storyline. We're like, no, 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 that was always there, and we're like, no, no, it wasn't. This giant, like, broken down fish market was clearly not here, guys. But yeah, so that's getting into nitpicky side. But then on the other side, it's also Spider-Man,
Mm.
and some of the most fun I had swinging through playing with the black suit, and some of those boss fights were fantastic. So
Yeah.
I'm a little on the fence here,
Mhm.
frankly.
Yeah,
And
I
I
want to
think,
give my praises for Spider-Man too, kind of like sneaking them in here because I
yeah, go
quite
ahead.
couldn't on the most disappointed and honorable mentions. Like boss design, this was the best of the three. I felt the bosses were more involved. It wasn't just the dodge, press triangle, and attack repeat that was the other boss fights. There was like more strategy, especially because they added the parry button. So like a big boss like Scream, that one of the best moments of this game in the later third was like you needed to nail that parry button or you were screwed. It's kind of like I was talking with Richard Hogue from Hogue Law. He hates this game because he got stuck at Scream and he can't quite play it because he's surviving a stroke, so his like motor abilities are like so different, and that's a boss that requires a parry that has stuck like has stumped him now. But when I look back at that, I was like, yeah, the boss fights definitely felt more fun. Like some of these spectacle moments, like you were not big on the Sandman battle. Totally was for that.
Oh, yeah.
Like I totally adored like how insane the scale was because I was like, yes, it's like they took a God of War 3 style cue of like, let's start this thing so bombastic. The problem was that after that bombast, they pumped the brakes so hard. So it was like, gosh, they started so cool, and now it's like we're like spinning wheels, which that didn't happen. I think that was your argument that the 2018 Spider-Man started big with Kingpin, but couldn't maintain a pace like after that. And this one, no, it was like super high and boom, and that was kind of like a problem that I had with this game's pacing. But in its highest heights, like I think Spider-Man 2 was still a great game. It was just those highest heights. It's again why this also to me Spider-Man 2 belongs in all three sections of our lists. Like its highest heights deserve it to be like in Game of the Year stuff. Like its weirdness in story and focus and taking too long to get into like its best stuff. That's why I landed it in an honorable mention. And kind of like in the disappointment for me is like you see how Spider-Man 2, which was if you dial back when we did most anticipated games of 2023, this was your number two, Paul. It was like
Easily.
it was like you could have seen how like in a perfect world Spider-Man 2 was the easy best game of the three, especially after it reviewed so well and all that. So it's such a layered, complicated game to talk about because I did have a blast playing it. I give it a 9, like I mentioned, but obviously I would go lower now, like in hindsight. But Spider-Man 2, Insomniac games in general, they have something that inherently their games are fun regardless. So how I put it here, like if we were to like put it, I personally would put Mario at the top. More that I think Mario delivered more what I wanted out of it, and Spider-Man 2 was like more all over the place. That's kind of like how I see it. So to me, it would be like 11 would be Mario Wonder, and then Spider-Man 2 like at the bottom. What say you?
I think I'm gonna concede it. I would say if I had to pick it personally, just for me, it would still be Spider-Man 2 because of just the sheer level of enjoyment I still had. It's one of those the highs hit higher and the lows hit lower, but despite all of that, I think I just overall enjoyed my Spider-Man 2 journey. However, it was certainly not a better game, and therefore I'm going to concede that one. I'm going to save my fight for a little later, and we'll see what happens.
Yes. So then I guess just let me make sure that I have the math correct so that while I count this. So 1, 2,
Good thinking.
3,
Good
4,
thinking.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. So okay. So Spider-Man 2 that is our number 12 best game of 2020 to 2023, and Mario Wonder sneaks up at number 11. Now top 10. The number 10, Paul. You snuck this one in. Dead Space remake. Yeah.
I'm very
Dead
glad
Space.
for it.
Yeah. Dead Space remake, objectively the first great game of 2023. Like kind of like I mentioned, like the honorable mention is like Dead Space remake was like such a great showcase of the potential talent that's within EA Motive to take the great work that came before and make it better, objectively better, looking better, make it such a seamless next-gen experience. The best audio design of probably any game this year other than another one that was really good with audio. But at least early on, this carried the baton for me. And especially Dead Space Remake, if you played it with headsets, it is unnerving, like how great it uses 3D audio to like you hear the necromorphs coming from your back right, and it's just there, and it's like it's all the subtleties. And as we're also seeing like what's been happening with game UI, especially with a certain game that let's just say the NDA lifted today after a preview after a previous cycle that was less than positive, and everyone has been clowning on that certain game's UI. Dead Space Remake reminds you how great their UI design is, how seamless. Like they thought about everything, and where you see it in your character, like this certain lights that tells you how much health he has, the stasis, how much bullets you have, like when you pull the gun and all of that. It's like Dead Space was special for a reason back then, and this was successful for EA. And again, like I'm so glad that Dead Space resonated with people again because it was such a good game. Obviously, in another year, this would have been much higher. Like if this was 2019, for example, like in a year with lesser stellar new releases, Dead Space would go much higher for me. But it deserves its props because I do feel another remake that I did love got more props from people, and I feel there's more of a battle to be had in a certain way. I would certainly say Dead Space Remake looks the best out of those two. In fact, I got to reinstall it on the Xbox Series X because it's on Game Pass. I was like, I want to see how it looked in the Series X. I'm like, God damn, this is so stunning. This is such a pretty game. It's like, I can't wait to do another run through it. So tell me about Dead Space Remake.
All right, so this is that game that just doesn't stay out of my mind for very long. This is that game that so I have a very specific experience and relationship with Dead Space as a whole because I started with Dead Space 2. I am, as many people would know now, a huge fraidy cat. Don't deal with anything. The most I've ever played that was slightly scary was Resident Evil 4 and 5 and 6. And as people would know, those aren't very scary games overall. 4 you could make the argument for.
They're tense, but not scary.
Yes,
tense,
that's a better statement for that. But Dead Space 2 I picked up randomly for like a deep sale, and I sat down and I started playing it, and it was a game that transformed my life in what it subjected me to in the first 5, I would say even 2 minutes of what the first 2 minutes of Dead Space 2, that is, on what it experienced, what I experienced through it, what it subjected me to, how terrifying it was, and how it just held that. No matter how powerful I got, how easy it was to lose all of that in a second. The vibes were amazing. The feel was crazy. I loved the outfit. The characters were surprisingly memorable, despite seeming super generic on the surface. But then revisiting all of that to actually talk about the game that I've put here was just a true coming back to what made this game great in the first place and knocking it out of the park a second time like this, where now it would have been third time because you had the first time 1 came out, 2 came out, not talking about 3, and then we've had now the actual remake, which really makes me hope that we get to revisit the rest of the series in this new light.
That's basically been confirmed now. They sent a survey asking what people wanted out of like a Dead Space 2. So
That is great to hear, because that's still my favorite of the series. But at the same time, they did so much right with Dead Space One remake, and I'm just super. It was like one of those first, like, I had no real expectations outside of like, I hope it's kind of good,
Mhm.
to, oh, that was a great experience.
Yeah. And more so that we had just experienced the Callisto Protocol like a month before.
Also true.
And we were
Well motivated.
yes, and we try to be positive with the Callisto Protocol because again, I realized a lot of when I look back at 2022, we were definitely kinder to so many games that we needed to be because it was such a we were starving for things to play in that year that everything felt better. Now looking back, now we see it more a different light, and the Callisto Protocol was really not it. Especially after playing Dead Space Remake, I was like, yep, it's like the Callisto Protocol fell way short, and that's sad because that's the creator from Dead Space, but his original work still stands strong, and the additions from Motive and making it so seamless and potentially setting it up so that whenever they do Dead Space 2, things are even more set up or just flows more seamlessly into the experience. I can't wait for them to do it. It's like I'm just glad that EA saw the value of bringing Dead Space back because they were the ones that killed it after Dead Space 3 failed to sell 5 million copies in its first month. So, but that was a different EA. This is the new EA, the one that gives us good single player stuff like our number 9, Paul, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, that's where in our map that landed. So,
Yep. Do
Now-
you want me to take it away, or do you?
yes,
You got.
yeah, take it
something?
away. But can you compartmentalize the launch experience from your revisit? Because I think that paints a lot of your
It
feels.
certainly does. And I'm actually very happy that I went back again and started a completely fresh storyline at the end of, I would say maybe a month or two ago, just very briefly. And I got to the point, I didn't even get to the that bar. I don't even remember the name of it. That's on the main hub planet.
Bobo.
But even
Yeah.
yes, thank you. But just like the span of time that I played the prologue, the intro, and all of that through fresh eyes, getting to mess around with my character and the lightsaber and
Mhm.
all of that, it definitely brought my opinion of it back from that weird technical issues going on. And it looks like they
Mhm.
even had another patch
Yeah.
yesterday or today that
There. Mhm.
so I'm not going to judge it based on the revisit that had my tech issues really dropping it quite a lot from what my earlier opinions on it were.
Mhm.
I don't know if I would put it much higher just because of how much better all of these other games actually came
Mhm.
out. So I'm holding to where it is. I will not put it higher. But what a great experience for the early 2023 was.
Yeah.
Getting to play that game. The fact that you had a whole moment where you said this was my favorite moment of
Mhm.
gaming all time.
Oh yes.
Only to get it beaten by a lot of other stuff later. But
Yeah.
just the fact that that was even a thing, that the fact that that was in the running with everything else that we've experienced in previous years, that was truly impressive. That a Star Wars, that just Star Wars video gaming is in a great place with big quotation marks. But at
We'll
the
see this
same
year.
time,
We'll see this year
yeah,
with
we'll see
Outlaws.
this year.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. But I still think that Jedi Survivor was a success. It was a great experience to go through, and I'm glad it exists so that I can go through and experience the insanity that is just the gray morality at times, the actual mechanics themselves, the adventure feeling of it all, and just how good it makes you feel.
Yeah. This one will always feel special because this was episode 100 for us. The spoiler cast we made about this game, how we blasted through this game like at the nick of time for me to like put out my review at Season Gaming right on May the 4th, and I was recording on May the 4th, which was like our second anniversary of us doing the show like uninterrupted. So it was like I have so much positive memories attached to Jedi Survivor. Especially how like I was at the peak of my Star Wars revisit at the time where I had just gone through the Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga, where my opinion of that turned significantly for the better when I was done with episode 1. I got to see everything else, and I was watching Mandalorian season 3 at the time. Ahsoka was like coming in soon. me going through the movies again. It was just like I was living Star Wars bliss at the time, and Jedi Survivor definitely was the kind of sequel I wanted out of like a Fallen Order sequel, basically, like taking everything and making it better in almost every facet. It was like it definitely felt like more they definitely put more money into the production value of this game compared to the first game that looked so janky and so low res in comparison. It was like the increased scale of this game. This was the first of the many times this year where I was like, do I like this more than God of War Ragnarok? I was kind of like, and kind of like how I saw it was that I saw so much of God of War Ragnarok in that game, even down to a twist that happens midway through the story, or like late in the later parts of the story, which was so hilarious. But it was like, this is giving me the Ragnarok experience, but with less frills, like less stats. It's more like you get into the action more directly. Whereas God of War, like there's a lot of RPG stats and the armors and things like that. So it was like it has had all of those great things that it is so sad that the technical issues really bring it down. And that was probably its most disappointing aspect, because it was like the first game also was a technical mess. But because it did Star Wars so well, it was easy to just overlook it, because it was like they know the fundamentals of doing lightsaber combat. The story is really cool. I like Cal Kestis as a character, his cast of characters. Jedi Fallen Order ends with the greatest moment ever that a game can end, with that Darth Vader moment, which the Darth Vader moment in Survivor, not as great in my opinion, especially when you like align it with the canon.
It makes the previous one worse
yes.
by inclusion.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, it's like an amazing moment. Like it's very Western, like revenge, like twist that happens near the end, and how like instead of going big, they go so intimate that it's so intentionally anticlimactic that it leaves you like in such a great gray space for your character. And investigates the idea of like a gray Jedi that has embraced light and dark side equally, and makes me so pumped for the third game. Like whenever that happens, which the actor Cameron Monaghan already confirmed that it's already in the works. It was interesting the director left. Stig Amundsen, the guy that directed the first two games, that said in an interview that he saw this as a trilogy. He left Respawn. So I'm like, who will direct the other one? But I would hope that they carry the tenets. I hope they keep the writers, because they do write some really great Star Wars. And shout out to Turgle, the amazing, one of the best, best characters in this year that I think a lot of people have forgotten. It's such an out of place, like frog-looking alien, but such an endearing character. So I love Jedi Survivor, but it's just that in the year that we had, man, it was like this not being near the top of my list like says a lot. So
it really does.
Now, number 8, Paul, for the rest of the list. This one you didn't list it anywhere, because I think you didn't even put it in an honorable mention. I put it high on my list, so it lands here. The Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, which they're valid because they launched on PS4 and Switch this year. So that qualifies them, even though originally they came out in 2021 on mobile and PC. Why I love the Pixel remaster so much was that after I was done with the other game that's in our list, and me going back into the history of the series, going through Final Fantasy 1 and the American 2 and 3, which are 4 and 6, was like opened my eyes into like what made this series so special, like back in the 90s. Like why it became such a stalwart that then by the time they got to Final Fantasy 7, it was such a massive event. Like Final Fantasy 2, which is 4, which is the one that you beat this year out of this collection, which was kind of like one of your redemption arcs of a game that you played long ago that you never beat and you're able to beat now. And the stories that it tells, kind of like Final Fantasy 1, like the ones that I played, Final Fantasy 1, The Warriors of Light, basically seeing what Stranger of Paradise was based on, but like actually seeing the original story without having a Chad dude looking Abercrombie shirt wearing what's other meme characters you could call Jack, but you know what I mean. It's like just screaming chaos everywhere. But me playing that game kind of like backwards and be like, hey, I recognize the name of the monster. Hey, this is the Skeletor guy that the Jack punches in Stranger of Paradise. But then Final Fantasy IV, the story of Cecile, this Black Knight, redeemed paladin that goes against like his kingdom and like and his road to redemption, and seeing how like those themes also resonated in the game from this year. And then Final Fantasy VI, kind of like inserted itself into the top 5 favorite games of all time. Like the story of Terra, Locke, the big cast of characters that are going against Kafka, the most evil, sadistic villain I've ever seen in a game. And it's a sprite-based game on top of that. And it was still like, that sadism was like conveyed so beautifully in their incredible pitch perfect pixel art. Amazing sequences like the ghost train that I finally understood the whole suplex train meme that I have been hearing from Final Fantasy memes in so long. The opera scene, seeing them like use music in such a powerful way to like tell the story of one of the main characters as she's like enacting like this opera as she's singing, like, and seeing how that tells the like that it's basically like an early glimpse of her potential suicide later in the game when the world goes to crap in the world of ruin. Like the fact that this is this is probably the first RPG that I've seen where you lose, like the heroes lose, like definitively, like heroes lose against the villain, Kafka wins, the world ends and it changes completely and starts over. Like it was like just imagining experiencing that in 94 would have like blown my mind. That idea of like your entire world has completely changed now, new enemies, new map layouts, now you have to like reconvene. It was so funny. It was like they do the Breath of the Wild. They did the Breath of the Wild moment of the villain is like in the center stage of a map. You're waking up after the world has gone to crap. You either gotta go fight immediately or you're gonna like reconvene your forces to come face them. It was like they did that early, and I realized that the guy that wrote that scenario also worked on Breath of the Wild. So I'm like, so that is so funny. Like where these kernels kind of are born through it, but it made me fall more in love with Final Fantasy, and I think the pixel remasters for it. It's like there's such a great remasters with great quality of life. The XPs, the money things, the auto battle, and things like that. It's like they have made it such that it's easy to be able to experience these games now without like idiosyncrasies of the 90s. So really excellent work from Square Enix. I loved their pixel remasters. So awesome. You have anything to say? You have anything to say about this one?
Nothing nearly as good as what you would say. Just the fact that I'm really glad it exists. I'm really glad I got to experience 4, even though I had a bit of a hiccup there near the end.
That I helped you with.
Yes, you did.
I coached you. I was literally the people praying in the sense like, no, you can do it. Like at the end.
Yeah, it absolutely was. And I am so glad that I powered through just to even have that as a little tick off my docket of I've played Final Fantasy IV now, and that has added my grand total of Final Fantasy games I have beaten to like 3.
4. You have to yeah. 15, 16, 7 remake, and 4.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so I'm just glad it's there, and it just wasn't in that space of like top 10 because if I'd played maybe more than just the one, maybe, but I think that's where it's gonna stay.
Yeah, but you had a solid list otherwise. So. It's like I'm just glad that just my high placement landed it high, like at a number 8 spot. So number 7 spot, Paul. This one also was an honorable mention for you, but this one also landed very high on my list. Really late entrance, so yes, there may be some recency bias with this one, but I think for me this one was significant because it kind of like came at a moment where my feelings towards this game had been like in the crapper for like almost an entire year of me thinking, did I really like this game as much as I said I did last year? And that was God of Ragnarok Valhalla. So obviously when this was announced at the Game Awards, it's just like, oh yeah, it's a free edition, that it's a roguelike. I was like, we had been hearing about the DLC, so it was like, hopefully that is coming, but I mean, hey, it's free. I have it installed still on my console. I mean, like, I'll try it. I mean, why not? And then the PlayStation Blog preview mentioned that there was story in it. I was like, okay. And then I played through it. And I was like, they gave us the expansion for free. That's what they did. It's like, they managed to marry the best parts of God of War Ragnarok. Like, in general, it's amazing combat, this focus on Kratos, no longer apologizes for the Greek era and fully embraced it by bringing back sequences that are perfectly recreated, bringing back, having one of the 2 sequences this year where you press the 2 sticks to have like an immense hype moment that was included in this game. Um, the therapeutic kind of like facing of Kratos' past that had always been a through line in the 2018 God of War and the main Ragnarok story. Him always mentioning his previous stuff and all that. But this one made everything that he mentioned. It made it kind of like physical, and what that did in merging both the Norse and Greek eras finally together, and making me realize how much I actually miss the Greek era more than and realizing that I may prefer it to the Norse era despite how much I love the Norse era of God of War, and me just being happy of knowing that Santa Monica no longer had to apologize, because here's something that you probably didn't notice, but I've been noticing it a lot, that they were apologizing a lot for those games, and I was like, why are you doing that? Like, those games were like highly beloved. The only one that you need to apologize for is Ascension, which was the only game that they released that was not as super well received as the other ones. But it was like the Greek God of Wars were special for a reason, and I feel like they were kind of like kowtowing a lot into too many critics that were not vibing for God of War, that they were like, oh yeah, the Norse era is for them now. And I'm like, are you like just trying to like cater more towards those people? But it felt like they were now catering to everyone. We're like, no, this is for, if you've been a long time fan of the God of War franchise, from all the way to the 2005 game, where you see 3 scenarios recreated here: the agency like battle with the Hydra, you're in that boat; the Desert of Lost Souls is also there. The part where you have to push the thing to burn the body, that was like a puzzle from the original God of War. That it was like all of that was brought here, and how strong it ends. I felt like Valhalla gave Kratos a better send off in this game, in this game, but in this like free expansion, than they did in the main game, which ended nicely, but it was very like more anticlimactic and just kind of like a more solemn end. This felt like a more definitive kind of like embracing of like who he was, and that final talk that he had was so powerful, and and how great the gameplay works in the roguelike element, where it pairs it back and makes you like really like make hard choices of what you want to grab, and made me realize that there was more depth to the combat than I gave it credit for when I played Ragnarok, because I was like, oh yeah, this is one that I never picked, but is the choice here? Oh, I can do this. Oh, let me see if I can like spec this in this run. Okay, runs over. Let's see it. And how they took Hades in how can I say this, like inspiration, where you're always fed story all the time. Even when you beat it, there's even more story. Like, I want to keep playing it because it's like there's more and more and more they're defeating you, and how a lot of these things now feeds back into the New Game Plus if you ever want to do that. It's like it rekindled my love for modern God of War, but also in a way I think I prefer Valhalla more than Ragnarok because it distilled it to its best elements. And if I ever want to like replace something, I feel like Valhalla, it's like it would be like an easier thing to like re-experience, because main Ragnarok is a very long game and it has a lot of things that when I look back, I'm like, do I really want to go through the Iron Woods again? Do I really want to go through all this walk and talks? Do I really want to spend 17 hours before I see Odin and Thor again and things like that? Do I really want to play as Atreus when you really play as Kratos and he's so good to play as, and this thing is just focused on him? So it was like, yeah, that's why it was so high. It was like, and again, maybe recency bias, but I gave God of War Ragnarok my number 1 last year, so keep that in mind. So, but it reminded me why I gave it my number 1. But this may be even better. So,
yeah. For me, pretty much everything that you said. I am glad that we so pleasantly surprised, honestly, that we got the amazing epilogue / required reading for whatever comes next out of a free update that gives us all of the best parts of God of War, aka the little blurbs of story, references to Greek, and not even references anymore, just straight up Greek stuff, and the actual gameplay itself. So it's like you said, it's distilled to exactly the best parts of God of War. And like you said, even after you beat it, even when you lose, even when you feel like you had a really trash run, you're still getting a little step towards what you really need, not only mechanically, but through the storyline. Sometimes in the middle of a run that I thought was absolutely terrible and I was going to die in the next round, I would get this really heartfelt story between Mimir and the head Valkyrie, Sigrun, I think was her
Sigrun, yeah.
name. Yeah. Just talking about like what their whole deal is, their whole dynamic, and how like important the emotional connection for the two of them is. And I was like, dang, that's really heartfelt. And then I go off and die and come back, but I'm still sitting there thinking about like, wow, the how
Give me
this
more.
works is crazy. This is amazing. In like little moments when Freya disappears and they're like, oh, she had to deal with something, she'll be back, and sure enough, whenever you came back around, she's like, hey, I did that thing, what's up? It's like it's just always like a progression of stuff going on, and it was just really cool to see all of that play out and feel so good, and especially revisiting. Like, it's not just asset flipped. It's like clearly they put so much effort into this, bringing back old God of War villains and stuff. And
almost the entire suite of enemies. Almost the entire suite of that you fought them.
And I will not spoil who you deal with each like major time. That's I want everybody to deal with that themselves. But the fact that it goes through so much emotional growth for Kratos, as well as Kratos goes to therapy and deals with and finally accepts the horrible things he's done, even down to the random NPCs that he was killing in the first God of War game, is so much like coming full circle on this that it's just chef's kiss. Great.
Oh yes, it's why I loved it so much, and I'm glad that they were able to release that. It almost felt like Sony Santa Monica gave this to me after they had probably been in secret hearing how much I've been like, did I really like this? Did I really like this? But no, it's like, you really did like this. It's just they also gave me something that I like even better. So now moving on, Paul, to our number 6, Resident Evil 4. So this one, it was funny how high this landed in the grand scheme of things for us, but also I'm not surprised because I remember playing this back in March. This was the first big game of real anticipation that we experienced, because this was before Jedi Survivor. So this started the string, and this set the nice cadence of like high quality that in a way got like surpassed a few times this year, but also kind of like maintain it. And dare I say, Resident Evil 4 is one of the most fun games I played this year. The fun of the shit, like as tense as it could be as a survival horror, and different in a way as a remake, is like just the act of playing RE4, like the swiftness of moving Leon around and the roundhouse kicks, the one-liners, the parrying, being able to parry the chainsaw like at the last second, the power fantasy of like the different weapons that you can like keep like emerging and winning as you keep on playing. The fun of the mercenary mode that I got to experience later. Getting to see the story of this amazingly cheesy game that was the 2005 version, kind of like maintains some of its cheesiness, but still being told in a modern way, like with RE4, and still keeping the high standard of Capcom when it comes to remakes. Like, no one makes it better than them. Enough so that this did qualify at the Game Awards. It's kind of like in the top 6. When you had an entire cadre of great new releases this year, it just goes to show like the high quality that Capcom still operates in, like almost year in and year out. And barring the extra primal here and there, which is very rare, it was okay. It wasn't bad, but it was like RE4 was just excellent. It was excellent. I had an excellent time with RE4. It was like I beat it like 3-4 times in a row. Like each like being able to get into that like speedrun rhythm with the game, it was like so cool. And even things like that were annoying back in the original version, kind of like the section where you play as Ashley, how it's done in the new game is like it's done even better. The boss fights are even harder in this game sometimes, kind of like when you fight Ramon Salazar. He's like this stupid jumping monster all over the place compared to like what it was, just like that big plant monster. And and kind of like the final battle with, I think it was Sadler, or I don't forget the name sometimes. It was a really fun time. It's a really, really great game, and I'm happy to see it ranked so high based on where I put it and also how you put it, because you didn't talk about it as much later on, but this was kind of like your lifeline in March and April. So.
Yep. Sometimes I want to forget some of it, but this was definitely for anybody that doesn't know, the game that came out right after I had
Your move.
moved.
Hmm.
So I had no internet, I had nothing going on. It was a really rough situation. I was feeling really disconnected from a lot of friends and family. And Resident Evil 4 came out, a neighbor let me download it onto my system using his Wi-Fi, and I went over to his house for it. And I played and replayed that game at least three, maybe four times.
Hmm.
I went through Mercenaries when that dropped.
Hmm.
Um, I played the heck out of it. I memorized the attack patterns of the knight suits when I was playing as Ashley, so I was getting down to a science with that. And then it's ironic because I basically recreated the atmosphere of me as a child,
Hmm.
getting to play the one game that you got and you had to make it work
Hmm.
because you had nothing else to play.
Uh-huh.
So I just worked through that game like crazy. And even though I don't talk as much about it, because a little bit is because I played through it so much, I'm kind of like I finished
Hmm.
all there is to really finish with it, outside of whatever tedious things that it would require me to do to platinum it. And I just don't have interest in platinuming things
Hmm.
most of the time.
Yeah.
But I feel like I
You
experienced
you are
all.
sane. You are a sane person. I'm insane that I do it.
Yes.
I recently platinum Arkham Asylum twice. My second time we're
Absolutely
platinuming
insane.
it. So,
Yeah.
but
But anyway,
yeah, but it's so
it's
funny. Kind of like
it's a good time.
we're gonna talk about like our individual lists so people know where we rank things. You actually rank RE4 higher than I did. So
Which is
it's
funny when I
uh
break it down. It's weird because I keep going back and forth because of my placement of this and Dead Space Remake,
hmm.
because I love both of them so much, in like such a weird way, and I go back and forth on which one I consider better and
Hmm.
how much fun I had with one or the other. But
Yeah.
what did you end up putting yours at then?
Mine was because it was I think it was your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's for you ranked it as your number 6. Spoiler, and I ranked it as my number 7. So
Oh, okay,
it's so funny. It landed at a number 6 here.
that's
So
crazy.
yeah, based on the math. But
But yeah, it I have a great relationship with it now, that's for sure, because it
mhm.
got me through a really rough time.
Yeah, and it was perfectly made for being able to replay over and over and over and over and over again. I think it's just that kind of fun game. It's just it just is. So then number 5, Paul. This one's all you. Though I didn't mention this in an honorable mention. Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, number 5, best game of 2023 for us. You put this very very high in your list, and
Very.
this one I know for sure is like the 2.0 update, and you actually going back to that game last year around the
Yep.
time of Edge Runners
Hmm.
was the anime. So
Yeah.
after a time of Edge Runners, and you revisiting it with the proper next gen version, you played this thing at launch,
Hmm.
and seeing some of the changes of 2.0, and
Yep.
going through the entirety of Phantom Liberty,
Yep.
like this has solidified Cyberpunk as like a god tier RPG for you, and like
Yep.
top 10 favorite game of all time, probably, right?
Easily top 10, maybe top 5. I'm not entirely sure. I never like to rank it because it
Uh,
is constantly
yeah.
changing on me. But yeah, like let me talk a little bit about Phantom Liberty here because like you said, played it on release, have a very deep emotional connection with the story and the game process and everything. Coming back to it during and after Edge Runners came out, which was just fantastic animated content. Getting to play, I don't know how much of it I actually played. Maybe I finished it actually. I don't know. But anyway, I played a lot over there. And then with 2.0 coming out like a week or two before Phantom Liberty itself, I believe, I got just enough time to mainline my latest playthrough from start to Pacifica, I believe. where the DLC actually lets you begin. And I had just the time of my life where I was finally like, it felt like that moment when you see the character is fighting, they get a little hit and they drop the weights, and then they're suddenly moving super fast and they can't be touched. This was like that moment for Cyberpunk where it's like I saw the greatness in it all along, and finally everybody else was really seeing what like could have been became what is about Cyberpunk. And the fact that they just continued to put things out, the latest update put in the tram system finally, and a highway that wasn't actually finished. It's just all of this. It feels like it's finally a complete package for not only the story itself, the emotional through lines, the mechanics getting completely reworked, the skills being completely redone, some of them taken out, but most of them just added in to create all new builds, systems that make more sense. The fact that you actually need to watch out becoming a cyber psycho, because like that was a whole thing in the lore, and then like it wasn't touched on in the game at all, but now it's absolutely a thing, and you physically cannot install better too much gear unless you have a specific skill tree that turns you into one, and then you can weaponize it to your liking. And then Phantom Liberty itself, creating, oh my goodness, I walking into the intro mission of Phantom Liberty was
Amazing.
a
Amazing.
next level experience. Not only did you get like really cool BioShock style first person like cinematics that were in engine, of course, but like going from that into a crazy chase, into a shootout, into a like White House has fallen style storyline, into this crazy like CIA 007, for lack of a better word, just feeling like you're James Bond, even having like a whole Casino Royale segment, having all of like the deeper, darker Mission Impossible stuff, and then the even deeper, darker like Sicario kind of I don't even want to call it secret agent stuff for that, but like you go from everything from the top level fluff spy thriller to the most like gritty, horrifying like side of that, and everything in between. Even I wouldn't say halfway through, like 3/4 of the way through, getting to make a decision that completely alters the entire last quarter of the DLC for you, depending on what side of the unnamed characters you actually choose, both of which are heavily debated as being the objectively correct storyline ending for the story. That's how well it's all written, that nobody can decide which was better. No one is like, this is the good, this is the evil ending. It's just, what's your perspective on things? Do you want X rather than Y? Therefore, this one's the good ending for you. And even like it doesn't fully lock you out of the ending that you really want, because it gives you an opportunity to kind of walk back right at the end a tiny level, so you can either fully commit or you can kind of concede right at the end, but it doesn't undo anything you've done up until this point. And I talked about at the start of this video the whole Baldur's Gate 3 thing, where how many options you really had. This is certainly to a lesser extent, but it is fully fleshed out on the way you do things. And then the whole time you're just so fun to play through at the same time. So it's just such a great experience that I had. I'm so glad that I got to go through it. The new ending that they added made me depressed for about 3 days, and that's how it's just really well done. And also side content that rivals Witcher 3's side quests.
Finally.
Yes, finally. And I will say it certainly was lackluster beforehand, but now with this DLC at least, it really stepped its game up. So very happy for it. Very high on my list.
When I finally reached Phantom Liberty while I was playing it, if I had if I had also taken the crutch of like sneaking in a non-finished game into like a 10th spot, this one would have been it. Like it's really impressive stuff. Like I tell you, like Phantom Liberty is like sequel worthy in a way. Like just the leaping quality.
It really feels like it, yeah.
Yeah, and it being completely like just a new gen only thing also helped it a lot. And just Cyberpunk is just so good now. This is the reason, like why Starfield was so disappointing. Like looking back to it, because playing through Starfield and then playing this, I'm like, I try to like kind of like we were mentioning with Starfield. It's like I really tried so hard into giving it like excusing it for its ambition and all that, but then I realized it wasn't really ambition when I actually see what ambition looks like, and you see it in Phantom Liberty, and even just the 2.0 of Cyberpunk. Like it really is. It is the cream of the crop Western RPG currently in the market, and I'm glad it landed so high based on where you put it, despite me like only giving an honorable mention nod. So now, Paul, we're moving into the next category, not the next category, the next slot that was a tie, and we have to like unbreak it, and that tie was for Alan Wake 2 and The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, based on the math. So, two games that couldn't be more different. One was a 13-year in the waiting sequel that managed to be a transcendental piece of this medium that manages to bring all mediums together to create something that's so wholly unique. And then the other one is a sequel to what many people consider the greatest game ever made, and something I vehemently disagree with, but it's one that if they were to make the case for it, I would actually see it. I love both these games. I absolutely both these. Like this one's tough. This one's really tough because Tears of the Kingdom in May like consumed us. Absolutely consumed us. It was like, funny enough, these are the two games I reviewed this year that I gave a 10 over at Season Gaming. And I would say like with Tears of the Kingdom, it was more that I feel like my feelings for Breath of the Wild were validated. I always felt that was more of a first draft, or more like, yeah, I see like I love some of its innovations, but I feel like there was more that could be done with this, and I feel like Tears of the Kingdom was that. I would never stop laughing at the creativity in display of what people could make with Tears of the Kingdom, and seeing that the game would work within people there. Nothing will be the crucifixion of of the poor Koroks, and just like, and again, when you give players enough freedom for this stuff, they will think of the most heinous and most like ridiculous things to be able to do, and the big robots with the big like flaming, down there, that was always happening. It's like this game gave me so much hilarity with like how it unlocked the creative brain power of so many people and made it realize that in game design, I still haven't seen a better design game that allowed for that. That despite its limited hardware, that makes the game show its age many times. It definitely it's not as great looking as many things that came out this year, but it's just like you feel like Nintendo pulled magic with Tears of the Kingdom for that thing to work. And on top of that, I feel this is my personal favorite Zelda tale that they've ever told. I feel there was more involved, even in the things, while still keeping things that I didn't like about Breath of the Wild, like getting the story out of sequence with like the flashbacks and all that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that this time it wasn't flashbacks, but much more of you following a dual narrative with Princess Zelda. And you're realizing that she traveled back in time after the beginning where they wake up Ganondorf. And kind of realizing how she makes it to the present. Such an amazing moment. And the ending of Tears of the Kingdom is straight up hype. Especially when you have all your companions in Tao, when you finally go into the depths to try to fight Ganondorf, what happens to Ganondorf at the end, and how Zelda helps you. And it's this massive like light dragon where it's like both dragon fights in the sky as you're trying to like float around and help with the fight, and all culminating in the hand like in the skydive to grab the person you love. It's like the level of
my eyes, and I can still see the moment that I was doing it. We were driving back from Louisiana to North Carolina, and I'm sitting here with my eyes glued to the screen watching this whole thing happen. And after I beat it, I spent about 45 minutes subjecting my poor wife to explaining why it was one of the most amazing things I'd ever experienced in a game. And she's like, "That's nice, honey." And like, disservice to her because she was actually super invested. But
Mhm.
it just, like you said, the raw creativity, the
Mhm.
raw level of gameplay, the sheer feeling of adventure. Like few games can capture me as an adult with the
Mhm.
sheer we're going to let you experience this world as you want, and
Mhm.
all of it is going to be worth your time in some way, shape, or form, or guide you towards Ganon in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
And fixing a lot of the issues that I had with Breath of the Wild, where it felt like there was such a disconnect between what you needed to do and the, oh, I'm going to go hunt in this weird apocalyptic medieval land
Mhm.
and then eventually find these weird out of almost aesthetic machines that is going to magically shoot a laser beam and hurt Ganon at the end,
Mhm.
where this one all feels so much more connected
Yeah.
to what's going on, what happened before, the way it's stretching this whole thousands of year journey between Zelda and Link, also answering a lot of the questions people have had for 30 years about how old this game series world actually is, like
Mhm.
the amount of years that have gone on, to the point where like archaeologists are able to watch this game play out and go, that actually makes sense with how long things change and how culture changes through it. And not to get off on a rabbit trail, but just how that all lines up in some of the best last few hours of a game that I've ever experienced. And like problems that I have with it aside, it is still a like top 5 game for me.
Yeah, and more importantly, I think this is one that it's unfortunately that you had to travel around the time that we both beat it, so we couldn't quite record like our immediate raw
Yeah.
reactions of how amazing this was. I had to try to convey that to someone that didn't like this game, and Sebastian. So that kind of like neutered my being able to like express just how much like the final sequences of Tears of the Kingdom really like seared itself in my mind and be like, yeah, this is now my favorite Zelda game. So,
Hmm.
but Alan Wake 2, Paul. Alan Wake 2 is like something really special for like what it does for games and in narrative based like horror games. Alan Wake 2 from the trio of horror games that came out this year, the scariest one. And it's so funny. It's the one with the least monsters. It's all thanks to its masterful presentation, its masterful techniques, how it marries movie, TV, live action into video game seamlessly back and forth to create such unique moments that you're just like with a grin ear to ear, be like, I can't believe they were able to pull this off. And of course, I'm talking about the musical that happens in the fourth chapter of Alan Wake's side of things. Seeing like how seeing that moment come together beautifully as a story recap of the first Alan Wake being told in like this mix of video game, live action, musical that the lyrics are literally all about like what had happened to him and just how clever the game is. It's like this is a genuinely funny game at times, but that also makes it also so terrifying. But it also has some really amazing moments that are always punctured by music kind of like the All Gods of Asgard, like by the lake when you're having the big combat moment at the end where you have all the ghosts coming in and they're hyping you up like with the music. Incredibly clever stuff with the mind plays where you go when you go inside Saga Anderson and connecting the dots and all that, and how that mechanic eventually segues into like a real personal connection to kind of like to what someone goes when they experience like self-doubt and all the mental gymnastics you do in your mind to block yourself off or insert self-doubt and things like that. And that was all conveyed in gameplay. And I think more importantly, what I like more about Alan Wake 2 is that this is the kind of cinematic third-person action adventure game that Hollywood couldn't make, because it's special because it's a video game. It's not trying to just be like this pretentious BS that we see in HBO and or things like that. It's like Alan Wake 2 works because it doesn't forget it's a goddamn video game. And it's video gamey stuff interspersed with how like the video gaminess is like merges so spectacularly with a cinematic ambition. It's like it was such a special like package. And to me, it was like, if I have to say which game was art this year, I think it was probably Alan Wake 2. Like a true artistic, like true art that it's so unique among its peers. Is it the most fun game? No. Is it horrifying? Yes. Is it incredibly memorable? Absolutely. Do I appreciate immensely the fact that they released a new game plus so quickly? That also changed the story of the game, like contextually, and also added a new ending that I still have to see through. It's like, Alan Wake 2 was just so special. Mm-hmm. Deciding between it and Zelda right now, especially after talking it out, real tough. Real tough. So, what say you, Paul?
I mean, I love Alan Wake 2, and I agree that it is more pure art that it's impossible to recreate in a live action space. It is completely, I would hope, going to make a lot of people that make video games relook at what's possible, especially now in video games, especially with the power that modern consoles have. And then I have to come back to which game did I have more fun with?
And that's Zelda.
That's Zelda.
And because of that, Alan Wake 2 is number 4, and Zelda is number 3. I'm happy I'm happy with how that lands. So
yeah, it really just, the way you break it down and you have to make a decision on that is it's insane, because technically on my list Alan Wake 2 is higher than Zelda for me, but at the same time,
actually no, opposite.
Did I? Oh
yeah,
shoot. Okay, well then
opposite.
I hold to that. I'm glad. I
to me it's like the opposite. Like Alan Wake 2 is higher, but I see it more from its art, like from artistic perspective. But for the sake of our combined game of the year list, I feel like Zelda can sneak up, but it's a top 5 game. So number 2, Paul, this one's here because it was your number 1 game, and it was high up there for me too.
It was high,
and it's because it was probably the most pleasant surprise of this year. Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon.
Oh yeah. So let me break it down for y'all real quick. You're an adult. It's 2024. You have about 20 minutes to play something, maybe. Do you want to break down something like Apex Legends or Fortnite, which have like 17 to 22 minute windows of playing something, only to get nowhere? Do you want to play a fighting game around for a few minutes? Do you want to just make a tiny chip away at that huge Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough you got? Or do you want to play something that has mechs, that has solid action, that makes you feel like you really played something during the short time you were sitting in front of your TV, rather than something like Metal Gear Solid, where you get to play about 30 seconds and then watch a 3-hour cutscene? Or do you want to sit down with Armored Core 6, mess around with your build, and jump into like 3 to 5 good missions, some of which are only 90 seconds long, and some of them that can stretch that full 20 minutes? But the good thing is you already know, because you've already played through this game at least 2 or 3 times, of course. And you have unlocked more and more things each playthrough. You have gone through the 3 different endings. You have got all the cool outfits. You've got the multiplayer mode that is either 1-on-1 or 3v3, if depending on your liking there. Completely can respec your character at any time, and just pure fun adrenaline shot in the arm that you need after that really rough day. Armored Core 6 is a game. Okay, so Armored Core is the series. Never played any of them, and I wish, I am kicking myself mentally that I never played this series before this last year, rather. Because this is exactly the distilled energy that I love, that in a lot of ways I've missed, and I wish more games were what's the word? They were confident enough to just play a game like this. You don't need to open world everything. You don't need a lot of that other stuff that people thought that you really needed out of this. You don't need crazy overdone cutscenes, because most of this game's cutscenes are audio files.
Yeah.
Can't believe Metal Gear Solid 5 really saw that one coming, huh?
Yeah, right.
So, anyway, time to finally get off my soapbox. But Armored Core 6 is easily the biggest surprise for me, the most fun that I had, and I could just go back and replay it dozens of times, I think.
Yeah.
And I cannot say that about anything else.
It is a game that I see myself going back to for many years because of
Yes.
the arcadey nature of trying to S rank all of those levels, figuring out the perfect build, figuring out how to like overcome some of its insane boss fights. Baltius can go fuck itself, but God, man, Baltius was like finally nailing like the double rocket and sword combo for that one to take out the shields and like just melt huge chunks of of an enemy's health, and then you're realizing, okay, this is taking too long. Maybe my build's not correct, and the game quickly allowing you the chance to like switch things around in like a checkpoint or like kind of like in a restart to immediately put you back in the action. It's like there's like a dopamine feeling of like getting to complete a lot of these missions or like one after the other after the other after the other. The amazing like eerie spectacle of Rubicon, like that kind of like how would you describe the environments in this game, Paul? Kind of like this decayed factories and like civilizations, things like that. Is like there's like from an art perspective, like just the artistic like punch of just standing there and taking that screenshot and taking it all in.
Most of this feels like, what if you played through Nier Automata, but you were actually 25 feet tall and you didn't care about the robots?
Yeah.
And that's Armored Core, baby.
Yeah,
Let's
that's just
go.
and that's just kind of like the Japanese style. It's like there's just a sweet Japanese-ness to this game that is just so sweet. It's so like satisfying. It's so like pitch perfect. As soon as you're moving your robot, you feel it. Like as soon as like you get the feel of like engaging the thrusters, moving around, float up or down, and deleting chunks of enemies' health. That's when you know it's like from a field perspective. God, this game's so good. Like I'm so happy it is that high. It wasn't my number 2. It was a little lower from that. You'll hear it in our individual list, but yeah, Armored Core 6 is like definitely a pleasant surprise for me. But the pleasant surprise for me was the game that ended up being number 1, and I was able to push this to number 1 thanks to where you put it also in your list, and that was Final Fantasy 16. So Final Fantasy 16 is the game of the year for the Xbox crew. And yes, this game's not perfect. Dare I say, the games beneath it are probably more consistent. Final Fantasy 16 has the highest highs I have ever experienced in a video game. Ever. I think about those moments often. Going all the way back to the demo we played the week before the game came out, where we became SpongeBob holding the coffee cup alone at the restaurant meme after we were done. Kind of like just such a gut punch of a beginning that combined like incredible heartache and spectacle, and the story of Clive Rossfield's kind of like a fall from grace as a member of a royal family that may or may have killed his own brother based on what he reveals, and kind of like the redemption he goes through as he's trying to save the world of Balestia, as they're all war each other because of this whole mother of crystals and things like that. And just the hype moments that happen in here, like starting from when you accept the truth, like early in the game, where basically the story kind of like ends, like what you think the story is at the beginning kind of ends and then sets you up for the rest of the journey. And moments like the fight against Titan, where it's multifaceted, where you fight one-on-one with him, where it ends with you pulling a Count Dooku on Yugo Kupka, who's the Titan, the Titan icon, to then your rematch where you both like Hulk out, and then like he just like absorbs an entire amount of crystals and just becomes this massive monster, and then you still face him, and then like the music switches into something like it is freaking Jet Set Radio, and you're kind of like dodging like his tentacles and going all the way up there. The fight against Bahamut, where it's basically you go to space to fight him, and all concluding with like the Ultima battle, that long battle that is like the most anime battle I have ever seen. Long-winded, perhaps, but it was like just everything coming together, just a complete power showcase of your character against this godlike figure that ends with you freaking punching him in the face in the perfect still shot with the 9,099.9999 damage and the really heartfelt story that you didn't think would be this heartfelt, especially for the kind of character that Clive is, that he can be like so gruff sounding at first, but he's the most gruffy looking nerd herder with a heart of gold. And just like his romance with Jill, like such a tender, mature romance that never like delves into like any anime or kind of like any trope that you think was like and more importantly the love between Clive and his brother Joshua, that how it underpins a lot of like the game's emotional punch, and how that really came together with the story that by the end of it, like I will never forget being. Do you remember how you felt, Paul, when you finished it? Like,
oh yeah,
those feeling, like that feeling. I was like, I was empty inside. Like it was like it really like I would say emotionally distraught, but it was like really emotionally sucker punch me. And
I know you had to face a lot of familial connection things that you got to see in that, because it's one thing that Final Fantasy 16 did really well, and 15 before it was showing different kinds of love, not just the romantic side, almost at least for 15 barely existing, but 16 like certainly it's a very pure loving romance there, but also just the focus on brotherly love, the connection between the found family you create, and how extremely cathartic it feels at the very end of that game to go a full like Ashura's Wrath. This is like my story, Gurren Lagann. Who the hell do you think I am? I'm gonna throw my freaking sword through your chest, boy. Just using all of your powers that you have at your disposal in such a great sequence. And then to get hit with all of those emotions by the end of the game was very difficult to process for me for a few days, I remember. But it's also so dense of a game that I couldn't just like replay it like some of these others, so I had to just sit there with it for a while.
Oh yeah, I couldn't talk about this thing without crying. It happened in our spoiler cast, and it would happen when I would try to explain to someone why that game like resonated with me so deeply. It was like I was not expecting a Final Fantasy game to like really connect with me emotionally, especially when I came into this game. I was expecting just for it to be like a fun hack and slash game in the vein of Devil May Cry, and that's what it was. I would say that it's both a strength and a weakness of that game, because in it trying to be an RPG light, it was like what made that combat cool happened way later until you unlocked more stuff. Unlike with Devil May Cry that you had everything unlocked at once. But once you had everything unlocked, the combat of this game was so damn satisfying, and I love still like the people that still do the combat montages. That made me realize, gosh, it's like you can really do a lot with this combat. It's like there is more depth with this thing than I even dare give it credit for, and even things like Torgal. There's like this side quest for Torgal where you go like to that what was it, kind of like the treehouse that you visit, and then you realize that Torgal over the years was collecting all the swords for Clive, as he was hoping that Clive was alive after they were separated after the big tragic event, and how he never like lost that hope. And you see kind of like how all those like side quests, which by the way, the early side quests of this game were not good, but side quests got better incrementally as the game went along, that created really great payoff. Like for Clive's relationship with everyone in that you meet in the game, from his uncle to Joshua to even Jill and Gav, the amazing like squire for him that loses his eye, but
I did not see a lot of depth from Gav at first, and I was so proven wrong by him. I was like, oh, he's so forgettable. I don't even remember who it was. By the end, I was like, Gav is my boy.
Yeah. And even like characters like Goots, that I made the joke that you were like that this giant dude with like heart of gold that's kind of like a baby inside. It was like so many memorable characters in this thing, and just moments that when I think about a game in this year, like when I think about a game this year where the moments stick with me regardless of the quality of the entire thing, that has been this game. Like, it may not be the best game of 2023, but God is in my favorite. And that favorite, and to me, it was like, I'd rather something that sticks with my heart. Like, this game's gonna stick with my mind and my heart. Like, I can imagine for years to come. And playing its DLC that came out during the Game Awards, and the one that's coming out soon, that's Leviathan themed. Like, I can't wait to spend more time with that world, especially right now that Naoki Yoshida, from the director from 14 that directed this game, and his team are moving on to like continuing to do work on 14 and all the things that they're adding, which is wild. I've been seeing so many crazy stuff they're adding to 14, and I'm like, is this the year where I finally fully dive in after we tried a little bit last year? But yeah, I'm glad that my favorite game ended up at the top. It was and you helped in that one, Paul. It's and with and with that, like, let me read from 14 to 1 again, and we're gonna read our individual lists so people know. So again, like, our combined game of the year list, starting for 14, Hi-Fi Rush. Number 13, Baldur's Gate 3. Number 12, Spider-Man 2. Number 11, Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Number 10, Dead Space Remake. Number 9, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Number 8, Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters. Number 7, God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. Number 6, Resident Evil 4. Number 5, Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. Number 4, Alan Wake 2. Number 3, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Number 2, Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon. And number 1, Final Fantasy 16. And for people to know how I rank these things, like, my number 10 was Hi-Fi Rush. My number 9 was Mario Bros. Wonder. My number 8 was Star Wars Jedi Survivor. My number 7 was Resident Evil 4. My number 6 was Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters. My number 5 was Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. My number 4 was Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon. My number 3 was God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. My number 2 was Alan Wake 2. And my number 1 was Final Fantasy 16. Funny, like, fun fact, Paul, Armored Core 6 was my number 3 originally. If God of War Ragnarok Valhalla had not come, we would have had a two-way tie at number 1. That would so we sort of dodged the bullet there, and I won. You can read yours now. From 10 to 1.
So we have 10th place Baldur's Gate, 9 Spider-Man 2, 8 Dead Space Remake, 7 Star Wars Jedi Survivor, 6 Resident Evil 4 Remake, 5 Alan Wake 2, 4 Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, 3 Final Fantasy 16, 2 Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, and 1 Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon.
And there you have it. That was Game of the Year 2023. And now we move on to 2024. Next week, Paul, we're going to talk about... well, it's funny because next week there's going to be the Xbox Developer Direct, where they're going to be showing like Indiana Jones and all that. So we might be able to talk a little bit about that, but next week we're going to talk about some of our most anticipated games.
Yes.
We're not going to do like a top 10, but we're just going to read like games that we're anticipating. So,
all right, that's fine with me.
So, and with that concludes the first episode for season 4 for DX Bottom for the year 2024. Paul, where can people find you?
As always, y'all can find me at Dork of Art on Twitter. I haven't really drawn anything lately, but I do actually have a notebook picture that I need to post. Overall, though, I'm still posting things of me either breaking games or crazy things that have happened. It's just a lot more frustrating now because PlayStation removed the ability to just immediately update to Twitter.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating.
Thanks, Elon Musk.
Yeah, you gotta love it. But yeah, that's where I am for now in the foreseeable future. Where can they find you, Alejandro?
They can find me on Twitter /X at @A_Segovia. They can find me in Threads /Instagram at AlejandroSegovia93. And they can find my written content both at thecriticalcorner.com and at seasongaming.com. I might do a written word about everything that we just said over at the Critical Corner. And my first review will probably be The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered over at seasongaming.com. You can go check an article all of us at Season Gaming wrote about us giving our personal rankings of all the Souls games. I'm the one that put Bloodborne at number 1, and also my buddy Zach, who also was one of the guest stars from Season Gaming that came in October that one time. So, well, the rest of the people put Elden Ring because, of course. So, you can go read that and check everyone's right and wrong opinions about that one. And yep, that's pretty much it. Paul, glad we were able to get back into the swing of things, especially for a year that's gonna bring so much change. Exciting games coming so soon. The Prince of Persia reviewing as well as it did. Super, super pumped. That's the first thing we get to play. So, and then next month.
Can't believe it.
Yeah. The excitement of 2023 has bled over to 2024. I'll take it. So, and with that, people, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. We're excited to see what 2024 brings for the show, especially with some of the changes we announced at the top. Can't wait to see more people come in when Paul isn't able to come in, or be able to have Paul as much as I can have him, or his schedule allows it. So, but until then, 2024, hopefully it's not gonna be too wild a year in the words, like in things that should not be wild. Like, we're not gonna talk about certain presidential elections happening this year. So we're here
Not
to.
doing
It's
that.
yeah, we're
It's not
here
worth
to,
our time and sanity.
yes, we're here to escape from all that. So, and until then,
Press X.
to play.
Good night, everybody.
Hasta la vista, baby.